Yes. Hello, my beautiful friends. What a day it is. The Supreme Court coming down with a decision against the president, 6-3, saying that this current incarnation of the tariffs are illegal, unconstitutional, doesn't have the power to do it. Now, we're going to go through the decision. It's a big one, 170 pages. I've got a mind map queued up for us so that we can see when we zoom out exactly what's going on. But we've got the dissenters led by Kavanaugh, who is saying it's just kind of a temporary setback, more or less. In other words, the president has other tools that he can use to help ensure that America's economic future is not being hollowed out by foreign countries that will, of course, steal our IP, then produce goods and services at a cheaper rate, and then flood our markets with them, hollowing out our manufacturing, as we've seen for a long time in our country. We're all pretty sick of it. We were excited to see a rebalancing of the global order. But of course, the Supreme Court said no. We'll go into it and see what the latest is before we turn our attention over to Georgia, because the DOJ is now getting pretty tired of Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State over there. A lot of lawsuits flying courtesy of the Civil Division and Harmeet Dillon. And they want the voter rolls from Georgia. Georgia does not want to give up those voter rolls. There's federal law that says the DOJ is entitled to those records. But there's been a big battle back and forth between both sides. And now today, we've got a motion to compel Brad Raffensperger to deliver the files and all the records over to the DOJ, and some follow-up from yesterday's state election board hearing, where we have a great clip from Jason Frazier, who's explaining exactly what's going on there in Fulton County and why Fulton should not run their own elections, that county. The state should come in there and take it over. So it's going to be a beautiful stream. We are here early. Thank you for joining us early this morning. The reason we're early is because we're coming back this afternoon, actually this evening, late. And we are going to help help deliver an announcement about a release of a documentary from our friends at Empower Oversight, the IRS whistleblower crew, the lawyers who represented them, putting together a big documentary. And we're going to have, I think, a bunch of great guests tonight. So if you're looking for something to do this Friday night, come back this evening, 6 p.m. my time, 5 p.m. California, 8 p.m. East Coast time, and we're going to stream all night long, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So thanks for joining us back this evening. We're looking forward to it. But without any further ado, let's get right into it. The Supreme Court with a new decision now canceling Trump's tariffs. It's a big decision, 170 pages, as you can see right here. We're going to go through it, and the majority opinion is saying that this portion of Trump's authorization that he was relying on, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, doesn't give him the power that he thought that he had. And so they're reversing this, but the dissent is saying, led by Kavanaugh, Alito, and of course, Judge Clarence Thomas, are saying that the statute is actually pretty clear. And if you just read it, it gives him the authority to do these things. But he also will have other tools in the toolbox to make sure America's economic interests are accounted for and we're not being hollowed out by foreign nations. And so we're going to go through the whole thing, hit the highlights to make sure we understand what every judge is saying. We've got Judge Gorsuch, who joined in the majority. We have Judge Amy Coney Barrett, who joined in the majority, the main decision drafted by the Chief Justice John Roberts. And of course, all the libs joined in with the conservatives. And there's a smattering of different reasons as to why they upheld this. But I wanted to just zoom out on this before we get into the nitty gritty and share with you this mind map that we have created very quickly this morning. And so we've got a couple things we want to dive in on. First of all, the case is about this party, the plaintiff, called Learning Resources, and we've been covering this for a while. Learning Resources versus Trump. It came down today. It's referencing the International Economic Emergency Powers Act, the IEEPA, the AIPA, passed back in 1977. And a big part of contention here was about the tariffs on certain countries. And you'll see some conversation about friendly countries and not in a state of war. In this case, tariffs being imposed on Canada, Mexico, China, you could say is an adversary, but they're saying, how can you just start tariffing your friends? What kind of a president are you? Well, we're going to get into it. We know the court held a holding today. The highlight here saying that the president does not have the power to authorize these tariffs. And we've been covering this for a long time. In fact, we read the decision that came out from the CIT, the Court of International Trade, which is filled with some judges that I've got, questions about, but they've got jurisdiction over the tariff claim. We read their decision previously where they said Trump can't do any of this because it's going to harm our allies and blah, blah, blah. And of course, the result today is that lower level court judgment is affirmed, and they're saying the president doesn't have the power. Couple important constitutional provisions that we need to look at. Of course, Article 1 is the article that covers Congress, the legislative branch. And if you zoom in on it, it's Article 1, Section 8 that talks about Congress has the taxing and the tariff power. So by default, Congress does have the tariff power. Okay, nobody's disputing that. The question, of course, is whether the IEEPA was a proper delegation of that power. In other words, Congress gave this over to the president, and then the president was exercising that judgment. And this makes a lot of sense because Congress can't do anything, really. They can't pass legislation if it hit them in the backside. So they delegate a lot of this over so that a single party, the executive branch, can make these decisions and rebalance an imbalanced trade world, which we're currently in. Now, we of course have the separation of powers. Can Congress properly delegate this over to the executive branch? And we also have this other major questions doctrine that is going to be the subject of a lot of the disagreement. So we'll see that the libs on the majority decision are not really going as far as the major question doctrine, and some other justices are hanging their hat on this. But the major questions doctrine is saying if it's a major question, then you got to go point to clear congressional authorization. So you can't just sort of unilaterally pass laws out of the executive branch. And when we talk about the major questions, it's what are you doing and what is going to be the impact of it? Is it going to have major economic concerns? Is it going to, shift the whole fabric of our country? And if so, then you got to go point to clear authorization that Congress passed that gives you the power to do that. We also are going to look at some statutes. What does regulate mean? And are certain words missing? How do you look at the power in the context of the rest of the statute? How do you look at the context, historically speaking? Has this been done before or has it not been done before? And so today we've got some arguments that are going to be rejected. We'll get into that. But the judges ultimately, just to give us a highlight before we zoom in on it, just so we can see, it's hard to kind of see who said what over 170 pages. But the majority is John Roberts, okay? The Chief Justice, we know who he is. And he is going to say this is the major questions doctrine in action, that the tariff power is so strong that you need Congress to give you a very explicit, unequivocal right to do that action. We've got the libs joining in, of course, concurrences by Kagan, Sotomayor, and Judge Jackson, the three libs. They say, we don't even need to go into the major questions. Just read the text and you don't know. We have ordinary tools. We don't need to invoke this other doctrine. We've got Gorsuch. He came out. He wrote a massive concurrence joining the majority. So it's a 6-3 decision. We've got Gorsuch, Barrett, Roberts making up the three kind of squishy Republicans on the Supreme Court, plus the libs, Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson, all joining in the majority. But Gorsuch came out. We're a big fan of Gorsuch most of the time. And he said, well, let's go back to Article 1. And the major questions doctrine is going to protect Article 1, which is the congressional power. But Congress, as we believe, delegated this out, but he didn't think so. We also have Amy Coney Barrett, who's saying, well, I'm just going to read the text of the IEEPA. And in the text, it says you can do these things and you can't do these things. So if you just read it, Amy Coney Barrett is saying Trump loses. But then we get to the dissent, and we're going to spend some time on this today. We've got Kavanaugh and Thomas. Kavanaugh says, and he leads the majority dissent, he said tariffs are a common regulation tool. We use these all the time. And the president is just taking that and running with that. And so we don't need to reinterpret all this stuff if he's already got that power. Then we've got Thomas, who says the non-delegation, in other words, part of the major questions is saying that Congress delegated this all over to the executive, and they can't do that. But Thomas says, yes, they can. This is about foreign trade. It's not about domestic policy. Yeah, maybe domestically, the major question doctrine applies because Congress should pass legislation if we're going to be impacting major swaths of our economy. But this is about foreign nations, and foreign nations, according to Thomas, have a lot of jurisdiction that resides under the executive branch, resides under the presidency. And so I think what we're going to see is the administration, if they want to, they can go back into the toolbox, pull out some additional tools, and then enact tariffs under different legal provisions if that is what they decide to do. But that's the highlight. That's the overview. Now let's zoom in on it and see exactly what happened. Out of the Supreme Court of the United States of America, 6-3 decision. The Trump tariffs in the current incarnation are now canceled. Going back down for further review. And of course, a big part of this conversation is going to be whether or not refunds need to be enacted. We know we've collected billions of dollars of tariffs, and you can talk to various people and say, well, it's a tax on the population. If we are being tariffed, then we're paying for that. But the concern, of course, is that if we don't do that, if we don't have protectionist policies around our economic and our country, then we'll get hollowed out. You see a pattern like this happen repeatedly, where, by example, Tesla creates amazing new technology, revolutionizes automobiles. Everybody jumps into, electric vehicles. They build a factory in China. China says, perfect, come build a factory over here. People are excited about that because they want to access the Chinese market and have their vehicles created at lower rates. But the problem is then China steals the IP. Then they create another company called BMD. And then that company undercuts Tesla and is now flooding the market with even cheaper cars. And then that comes back to America and it hurts our industry. The pattern happens all the time. Tesla is just a big example, but it happens for everything. And so if you tariff that, then that incentivizes domestic production to actually be able to compete with these foreign countries. We've seen our country hollowed out my entire life. Everyone's, globalism, it's going to be amazing. Then you drive around our streets, we've got Dollar Tree stores everywhere. We manufacture nothing. So the decision came down today, 6-3, and we'll hit the highlights, of course. It's 170 pages. We'll spend a little bit of time on the dissent to see what other tools exist in the toolbox. But here's the summary. It says the question presented here is whether the IEEPA authorizes the president to impose tariffs. As we know, shortly after taking office, boom, Trump came in. He said, we got illegal drugs coming in here from Canada. We don't want them. Mexico and more, and China issued a presidential proclamation. He declared that there was a large and persistent trade deficit. And he said the drug influx had created a public health crisis as well. And that trade deficits, which we agree with, you can just look around if you've been alive for the last 40, 50 years, led to the hollowing out of American manufacturing and undermined critical supply chains. We can't even build enough artillery. Many estimates say we'd be out of artillery in a war with China in like days. You can go and source that from Palmer Luckey, who's the CEO and the founder of Anduril, another defense company. The president then declared a national emergency and said, we are now imposing tariffs. He said these are unusual and extraordinary circumstances, and he invoked his authority under this provision. Now, as you know, our laws in America are just massive. We've got so many tools in the toolbox that we can use. And you hear this often in the context of criminal law, where they say you can just drive to work. You've committed like 3 federal felonies, right? Just depending on how you interpret the law. It's kind of an over-exaggeration, but you get the point. So IEEPA, just one tool. We'll come back to that. So Trump came out, he imposed tariffs. Now, as the drug trafficking, he put 25% on Canada, Mexico, also 25%, 10% duty on the Chinese coming in, and called these reciprocal tariffs. He imposed a duty on all imports from all trading partners. You want access to our markets? There's going to be a little bit of a cost there. And dozens of nations faced even higher rates. Now, since imposing these, the president has adjusted it. Lots of increases, reductions, modifications, because the president is using it as part of his negotiation toolbox. Petitioners then in learning resources, not leering resources. I know you might think that. I thought that. Maybe the Somalis are here? No, it's learning resources, not the Leering Center over there in Minnesota. They were suing. They said this law doesn't give them the power to implement reciprocal or drug trafficking tariffs at all. These are 2 small businesses. They went and sued in D.C., the District of Columbia. That court denied the government's motion, and some more procedural history goes on. So the court granted summary judgment in favor of the plaintiffs, the people suing, saying the tariffs are illegal. Then in the federal circuit, they affirmed in relevant part, and they concluded that AIPA and the grant of authority did not authorize the challenged tariff. So the government filed a petition for cert. The government appealed, took this up to the Supreme Court. That's where we're at now. The Supreme Court granted all of the complaints, the petitions, and then consolidated the cases, and boom, dun, 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 held the Supreme Court in their holding said, AIPA does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. AIPA. Now, other provisions of law may authorize the president, and in fact do authorize the president to impose the tariff. So they vacate the lower judgment, remand it, and affirm another judgment in the other case, which saying the tariffs are invalid. So we've got a bunch of different decisions and opinions that are all being assembled in this 170 pager, and we'll get into it. Let's just dive into the meat and potatoes of the decision, starting by John Roberts, the Chief Justice of the United States. So he says today, we decide whether the International Emergency Economic Powers Act allows Trump to impose tariffs. Trump came in, imposed a bunch of them. AIPA was passed back in 1977. And they say when acting under this, the president must identify, okay, what's the standard? Must identify an unusual and extraordinary threat. Trump says, we got it. It's drug trafficking. We got 100,000 Americans, or did, dying every year from fentanyl and all sorts of meth and all sorts of other overdoses and drugs. It's a significant threat. We're losing people left and right. To American security and more, saying that the president, in order to impose this law, must declare a national emergency. And then once that happens, then he may, by means of instructions, licensees, or otherwise, this is the law, take actions to deal with the threat. He can investigate or block or nullify and do a bunch of things under the law. They're citing the statutes for us. So Trump came in. He did that. He declared a national emergency. He said drug trafficking and trade deficits are wrecking the country. These are unusual and extraordinary. He imposed tariffs and duties on most Chinese imports, Mexican imports, and Canadian imports, and others. And since imposing these, there's been a bunch of changes. You see all these executive orders, boom, 14266, 14259, adjusting the rates, increasing them or decreasing them. We've got the lawsuits that came in. We've got the learning resources. They took this case to the Court of International Trade. They said the district court, the DC court, can't hear these cases. Only this court can. The jurisdiction stuff is interesting, but not as pertinent as the other stuff. So we'll skip some of that. But based on two words, they say, separated by 16 others, this is Chief Justice Roberts writing, the law is saying these two words in it, regulate and importation. The president says under those two words, regulate and importation, but it's separated. So regulate, 16 words. Importation. The president says that gives me power. I can impose tariffs on imports from any country, any product, at any rate, at any time. That's what Roberts is saying, Trump was saying. So those words, says the Chief Justice, cannot bear that weight. Okay, so those two words, regulate and importation, cannot give the president all of that power. Here's why, according to the majority. Article 1, Section 8, as we just looked at, says Congress shall have the power to impose taxes, duties, imposts, and excises. And it's no accident that this appears first. The power to tax was, as Alexander Hamilton explained, the most important of the authorities proposed to be conferred upon the Union. Talks about the Federalist Papers. The power to tax is the power to destroy, which is rich coming from John Roberts because he is the judge who gave us Obamacare and decided that Obamacare was a tax, so you're allowed to do it because it had the individual mandate. We were all screaming about this. How the hell can our country force us to go buy a product? In this case, it was Obamacare. We all were flipping out when that happened back during the Obama years. John McCain stabbed us all in the back and supported that. And Chief Justice Roberts did the same. He said, well, it's a tax. Really, it's a tax to be mandated to go buy something or else you get a penalty. That's how he framed it. Of course, destroying healthcare. And now everybody's healthcare has gone up through the roof. So nice job on that one, John Roberts. But it's the power to destroy. As we continue, he says, the power to impose tariffs is very clearly a branch of the taxing power. It's a tax. It's levied on us. And, by the way, we're also having a cost. Okay, if a tax is a cost, you get taxed and you have to pay something. There's a significant cost of having our country hollowed out, having cheap foreign goods come in here and undermine American domestic production. We felt the consequences of that. There is a price to pay for that, in other words. He says, little wonder that the first Congress's first exercise of its taxing power was a tariff law. We've had tariffs for a long time in this country, and they were working very well until we had to impose on us all the income tax back in 1913, when our country went insane under Woodrow Wilson and imposed an amendment to allow us to be income taxed, which of course is to destroy us. So this is more in alignment with that. So he says, we've long expressed reluctance to read into ambiguous statutory text. We're not going to insert power that doesn't exist. And especially when Congress has an extraordinary delegation, right? Congress is very weak, so they want to delegate stuff. They don't want to be responsible for it. They're not interested in passing tariffs from Congress because it might hurt their reelection campaign or chances or something. And all of their foreign donors are going to be mad at them. And all of the business interests in America, like all these NGOs and all of these think tank groups and everybody who just really cares about making money, even if it wrecks the fabric of the country, they all donate to the politicians. So in Congress, they're not going to do anything to protect or preserve the integrity of America. When have they done that recently in memory? Never. So in Biden, they talked about this, 430 billions. They said, Biden, for example, they're giving us some, hey, look, like we went against Biden too. Remember, we declined to read authorization that Biden could also just waive 430 billion in student debt. He did it anyways. And they didn't care. So they go through, they give us some other, compare and contrast. Well, like in this case, we did this. And Biden, we said he couldn't just unilaterally waive $400 billion of power. So all of that consideration also applies here. And there are trade-offs. And when common sense is considered, it suggests congressional practice confirms. All right. When Congress has delegated its tariff powers, it has done so explicitly. So it's not a blanket opportunity for the president to kind of do whatever he wants, subject to very strict limits. Congress has consistently used words like duty, and duty is a tax. He looks up a dictionary definition. Duty is, quote, a federal tax levied on goods shipped into the United States. And there's all these other provisions, right? Even John Roberts is saying a 19 U.S. Code, 1338D, rates of duty, temporary import surcharge. We've got this provision here, duties and other import rules, all defined. Continues to cite a bunch of those. Now, against this backdrop, they're saying, look, Roberts, all of these rules are clear. You can do certain things, but it's got to be very specific. Against this backdrop, the government, Trump, reads AIPA to give the president unilateral power to impose unbounded tariffs. And on this reading, the president, though, is unconstrained by significant procedural limitations that other tariffs impose. And now there's a dizzying array of modifications at will. All it takes to unlock that power, Roberts is saying, all the president has to do is just declare an emergency, and then the government can't be reviewed at all. He says that's a lot. If we adopt that view, it would represent a transformative expansion of the president's authority over tariff policy that he says Congress never gave him. It would replace the long-standing executive legislative collaboration over trade policy with unchecked presidential policy making. He says it's also very telling that in AIPA's half-century of existence, no president has ever invoked this or even used this statute to impose any tariffs at all, because we've had a bunch of weak presidents. Who's going to do it? Most presidents were very interested in hollowing out America as long as it served their donors and the Congress people who needed that money to come in and support their campaigns. Presidents, though, have regularly invoked AIPA for other purposes. At the same time, they've also invoked other statutes, but never AIPA to impose these tariffs. For example, ranging on things from car tires to washing machines. Gives us a little history there about how other tariffs have been used. So this is economic and politically significant. And the president will have a lot of power if we give him this opportunity. The government says, hey, Trump's argument, we need the tariffs because we're going to use them to reduce the national deficit. We're going to cut the deficit, which is just increasingly growing every day. The argument is we'll use tariffs. We'll cut the debt and the deficit by $4 trillion. And this could go as high as $15 trillion to dig us out of debt. onshore manufacturing, reshore production back to the United States. In the president's view, writes Roberts, whether we are a rich nation or a poor nation hangs in the balance. And these stakes dwarf those of other major questions cases. So again, we talked about the major questions doctrine. They say 15 trillion. We invoke the major questions doctrine, which says if you're going to do something, you have to have very clear, specific congressional authorization. We invoked major questions back in Nebraska. That was a $430 billion case. Or Alabama, that was a $50 billion case. So if that is enough to invoke this doctrine, certainly $15 trillion is, says Roberts. Now, the government and the principal dissent, which is from Kavanaugh, which we'll look at, they attempt to avoid this, saying that there is no major questions doctrine here at all that needs to be invoked. Trump argues that the first doctrine should not apply to emergency statutes. Congress gave them emergency power. He's invoking emergency power. And by the way, if Congress is unhappy with this, they can just undelegate it. Just go pass a new bill and reverse what they passed back in 1977. But again, they're not going to do that because they're weak and pathetic. And they'd rather not have any responsibility or accountability at all, so they delegated it out. Then when an actual president comes in and does something with it, then they say, oh, this is bad for our voters. Or really what they mean, bad for their donors. There, the government said that a different emergency statute should be interpreted broadly because the whole point of the statute was to provide discretion to the president. Like that Congress said, you have emergency power. Trump is invoking it. And now they're saying, well, it's not actually an emergency. Well, you gave him the discretion to declare the emergency because you didn't want to do it. Dozens of AIPA emergencies are still ongoing, including the first that was declared over 4 decades ago in response to Iran. But as the framers understood, emergencies can be for a pretext. And then the power can exploit an emergency. The president can exploit the emergency for whatever they want, just like they did back during COVID when they locked us all down and then started to try to mandate that people ingest something into their bodies or else you get fired and eliminated from society. Now, the argument from the government and the dissent saying that this is really ambiguous since it's kind of questionable what the law says, you should default to a broad construction. Since it's ambiguous, you give the president the benefit of the doubt. But they say we can't do that. There are major problems, and this is why we should be on alert. When you give one branch too much power, this is the major questions doctrine, and so accordingly, they write from Roberts, the president must point to clear congressional authorization to justify this power to impose tariffs, and because it's not clear, he cannot do that. They walk us through some of the IEEPA stuff. They say the power to regulate ... importation does not fill the void. You can't use this provision of the law to say that you can then adjust $15 trillion worth of tariffs. The U.S. Code is replete with this word regulate. It says it all over the place. But the government, Trump, cannot identify any statute where the power to regulate includes the power to tax. The government even concedes, they write, for example, that the SEC cannot tax the trading securities, but they can regulate. So in other words, a bunch of other people can regulate, but that doesn't mean that they can pass taxes. Taxes can be accomplished by regulatory ends, he concedes, but Congress does it. Congress addresses the power to regulate and the power to tax, and they do that as part of their provisions. So a contrary reading, if we don't interpret it our way, would render this law unconstitutional, and neighboring words, kind of mashing them together, regulate importation, would grant the president way too much power. And so we're not going to attempt right now, they write, to set forth the metes and bounds of the authority to regulate importation. It's an interpretive question and it's not up for debate in this case right now. But the question is whether Congress, when conferring the power to regulate importation, gave the president the power to impose tariffs. And Congress, they use regulate all the time, but that doesn't mean impose tariffs. It did neither here. It was not explicit. So the government is asking basically us to read between the lines, and there's no support in the statute according to Roberts or in the prior statutes that came before the IEPA. And The government has another historical argument. They reference this other professor who said, well, historically speaking, we have had tariffs being imposed, and they go to other precedent. They say this case says this and this case says this. Now, in this third section, they go back to the argument from the president. Trump says we have extraordinary power to impose these tariffs. So they must identify the authorization. Where is the authorization? The judgment here from the majority is affirmed from the Court of Appeals, which divests Trump of this power. And so we now send this back. It is so ordered. That's the majority decision. Tariffs are dead. And you get the point from Roberts. Now, we'll fast forward through some of these other decisions a little bit, but Gorsuch comes out and has a concurrence here. He says, I join in full. The president says Congress delegated to him that power to impose tariffs whenever he wants. So I think the major question doctrines applies. The principal opinion rejects that argument, but I join in full. The Constitution says Congress makes the law, and major questions, right? If you're going to impact $15 trillion worth of economic activity, it safeguards that against the executive branch. So the president, says Gorsuch, very much the same, must identify clear authority. And in this case, as Roberts just explained, he can't do it. Gorsuch, Gorsuch, Gorsuch. Now, not everyone sees it this way. The past critics of the major question doctrine do not object to its application in this case, but they insist you can reach the same result just through simple statutory interpretation. So Gorsuch is going to deal with the dissent. Here, the concurrence from the libs. Okay, it's a 6-3. So these three libs, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson, are all in the majority. But they say it's not about the major questions. Just read the statute. The statute says it doesn't allow you to do this, which is also rich from the left because they say the statutes allow anybody to do anything. And I don't remember where they were on the Biden student loan waiver, but I would guess that they were more in favor of granting that as opposed to the conservatives. But others have joined the major question decisions, and we can't sidestep this. Kavanaugh says it's not about major questions. And so Gorsuch is going to give us 40-something pages of his concurrence saying that major questions does apply and that the libs are wrong. We'll fast forward through that because we want to get to some of the dissenting decisions, but you can see this is all Gorsuch. So we got a lot of scrolling going on here, and he gives us a hypothetical. He says, even Amy Coney Barrett gave us an example of this. He says, consider as well a babysitter hypothetical that Justice Barrett talked about. Imagine a parent of a young child who hands a babysitter a credit card and said, make sure the kids have fun. Then suppose the babysitter takes the kids on a road trip to an amusement park where they spend 2 days on roller coasters and 1 night in a hotel. Was the babysitter's trip consistent with the parent's instruction? Amy believes the answer is no, as a matter of common sense. Well, I don't know. I guess it depends on the parent. But really, though, unless one is to believe that children do not have fun on roller coasters, the babysitter and the hypothetical is back into substance and to external norms. And you're asking, in other words, what does fun mean in the context of raising kids? All right, get it. We fast forward through some of this. And let's go into some of the dissenting opinions. Gorsuch continues on talking about the major questions doctrine. Still Gorsuch, still Gorsuch. He goes on for like longer than the majority decision is. And sorry for all the scrolling, but I just want to share with you, how long this puppy is. So he continues on. Let's get to Amy Coney Barrett, who is coming up very, very soon. Right now. So Amy comes out and she says, okay, as the principal opinion demonstrates, the most natural reading of this says no tariff power. President doesn't have the power to do this. I write only to address Gorsuch. Gorsuch says it's a major questions issue. She says it's not really. To the extent that Gorsuch attacks the view that common sense alone can explain all our major questions, he takes down a straw man. I have never espoused that view, she says. Rather, as I explained in my concurrence back in Biden, the major questions doctrine situates text in context and is therefore best understood as ordinary application of textualism. She says, just read it. Textualists, like all those who use language to communicate, do not interpret words in a vacuum. We look at things in context. We look at legal conventions. We look at common sense. And she says, I've explained, Article 1 of the Constitution vests Congress with all legislative powers. Obviously, the Constitution bears on the meaning of a statute, and that was enacted pursuant to it, right? The Constitution impacts the statute. The statute can't be against or adverse to the Constitution, or else it's unconstitutional. And she says clearly, because Article 1 says Congress has these powers, a reasonable interpreter would expect that Congress would make big-time policy calls itself rather than pawning them off to another branch. But they don't. They want someone else to deal with it, in this case, the president, because they're too weak and spineless to do anything. They can't even pass voter ID. To the extent that justice, which most of the country wants, to the extent that Gorsuch also thinks that background legal conventions and constitutional structure inform the most natural reading, we may not be very far apart. And so they're kind of splitting hairs here. And so again, fast forward through that. She says, it's not about major questions. It's about just reading the statute. I read it. I put it in context. AIPA says you can do these things. Article 1 says these things. And so this is too much of a delegation of power. It's got to go back to Congress for the president to have the authority. Then we get the libs. We got Kagan, Sotomayor, and Jackson, and they're all coming out and they're saying the same thing. The president does not have the authority to impose tariffs. I agree with that conclusion because I think all you have to do is read the statute. You don't actually need to go into major questions or any of those things. Saying, is there clear congressional authorization for his action? Here, the demand is for a clear statement, something more explicit than what Trump has done. And he has not done that here. And so this case is the opposite. The use of a clear statement rule here is unnecessary. Even without a clear statement, the conclusion follows. The IEEPA, if you just read it, doesn't give him permission to do these things. There's nothing in that statute that gives the power that he wants. And we don't need to talk about it in the context of delegation. More dictionary definitions and more. Let's get down into the dissent so we can see what the conservatives said. Justice Jackson, ... Wait for it. We're not going to read it because she's just going to say the same thing. 4 pieces are relevant to the record, goes back into history, saying this other provisions that gave the power to the president were about wartime powers, and there's no authority here. And that's from ... Wait for it, the Chief Justice, who's not a biologist. Then we arrive with Justice Thomas. We're now at page 90. Judge Thomas comes out and he says, I join Justice Kavanaugh's principal dissent in full. We love Clarence. As he explains, the court's decision today cannot be justified as a matter of statutory interpretation. You can't read the statute and just say, oh, I don't see it in there. They say, what are you kidding me? Congress authorized the president to regulate importation. That's what it says. President regulates importation. Very clear. Throughout American history, writes Clarence, the authority to regulate importation has always been understood to impose duties on imports, tariffs. The meaning of that phrase was beyond doubt at the time that Congress enacted this statute. Right after Nixon's highly publicized duties on imports were also upheld based on standard language. The statute that Trump relied on, therefore, authorized him to impose duties on imports. They don't like it, they can change the law. Kavanaugh makes clear that the court errs in concluding otherwise. Now, Clarence is writing separately. He says, I want to explain why the statute here is actually consistent with separation of powers. And part of the, there's like a non-delegation doctrine saying that he'll explain it. Let me shut up. The Constitution's separation of powers forbids Congress from delegating core legislative power. Okay, if the Constitution says this is your role, we know they're weak and pathetic and they don't want to do anything because they might jeopardize their reelection chances. They can't just delegate everything over to the executive. It's a separation of powers problem. The president can't do the same either. And that's a good doctrine by design because we don't want any one branch of government to get too powerful. That's why we set up 3. The goal is you want to break up the elite factions. You have an elite judicial faction, an elite executive function, and an elite Congress. And if you consolidate all of the elites into one unilateral power structure, We all suffer. We live in a despotic dictatorship. So you can't delegate certain things and allow one branch to gobble up too much power like the Stones in one of those movies. Saying here, this principle is the non-delegation doctrine. This is Justice Thomas writing. It's rooted in the legislative vesting clause and the due process clause in the Constitution. Both clauses forbid Congress from delegating core legislative powers, which is a power to make substantive rules setting the conditions for life, liberty, or property. Now, neither of those clauses forbids or prohibits Congress from delegating other kinds of powers, in this case, the tariff power. Because the Constitution assigns Congress many powers that don't implicate the non-delegation doctrine, like they can't give it up, Congress can give up many powers to the president, and they have. They've done so repeatedly since the founding, and by the way, this court has blessed many of those. Now, the power to impose duties on imports can be delegated. Footnote 1, he gives us a bunch of details on the word tariff and Webster's dictionary and says this has happened a long time. Now, although colonial Americans staunchly contested efforts by Parliament to tax them, they conceded the authority of the British government to regulate commerce through financial exactions and tariffs. And he goes through and he talks about the Stamp Act crisis and other historical documents and articles that explain how this worked. Now, at the founding, says Thomas, that power was regarded as one of many powers over foreign commerce that actually could be delegated. Power over foreign commerce, this is not domestic, was not within the core legislative power because you need the president to make unilateral quick decisions. Very analogous to the commander-in-chief provision. Could you imagine if you had Congress like enacting battle plans? Okay, we're going to vote on whether to storm the beaches of Normandy. Imagine that. Well, what beaches? How long would it take? Form like 35 committees to do it. It would never happen. The Germans would have taken over the planet. So you delegate out when you need quick decision. Tariffs and these other decisions are engaging America with foreign powers. So that was allowed. Power over foreign commerce was not a core legislative power. So they could delegate it. And engaging in foreign commerce was regarded as a privilege rather than a right. Early Congresses often delegated this power to the president. And Thomas says, as I suggested over a decade ago, the non-delegation doctrine does not apply to a delegation of power to make rules governing private conduct in foreign trade. If it's outside America, Congress can give that to the president, and they did. So to the extent that the court here relies on a separation of powers concern, that rule against the president is mistaken, says Thomas. In fact, the non-delegation doctrine is rooted in both the vesting and the due process clause. And he walks us through the treaties, two treatises of government from John Locke, one of the core thinkers of our country. And it grants Congress the power to do the delegation. He defines what legislative power is. He talks about where it emanates from, due process clause. A rule made by someone other than the legislature, like a king, was not the law of the land. And many of Congress's powers do fall within core power. And if it's a core congressional power, they can't delegate it. For example, the Constitution gives Congress the power to regulate commerce among the states. Congress can thus make substantive rules for interstate trade. They can restrict drug shipments across state lines and more. Similarly, Constitution gives Congress alone many other powers that implicate life, liberty, and property, including the power to provide for punishment of counterfeiting, the power to provide for punishment of treason, and the power to impose internal taxes. Those powers cannot be delegated. Thomas says, I've said this many times. I said it in this case, I said it in this case, and I said it in this case. But Congress also has other powers that are not subject to non-delegation. We now think of these powers as quintessentially legislative, but they can be delegated out. Saying for most of American history, the non-delegation doctrine was understood not to apply to those powers. The early Congresses felt free to delegate certain powers to Washington in broad terms. They said, here you go. We don't want to do it. You do it. Thus, the Constitution gives Congress the power to support armies. But Congress delegated that power to benefit veterans who were wounded in the Revolutionary War. Also, they can grant patents. But in 1790, they delegated that power out. And he goes on, gives us a lot of lists of other powers that have been delegated. Now, all of these early delegations have one thing in common. They do not implicate the vesting clause or the due process clause. They're allowed. They even agreed at the Constitutional Convention that you can do these things. And so as a matter of understanding, original understanding about how our system was set up, historical practice and judicial precedent, the power to impose duties on imports is not a core legislative power, and so it can be delegated to the president, and they did. Talking about the power over external affairs is very different than internal affairs. And although internal affairs are governed by domestic law, external affairs implicate relationships with external parties. And that is the power that was delegated. Walking us through more history, explaining how the due process clause works. The government can charge money for privileges without depriving a person of property or due process purposes. The government charges people money every day for a wide range of activities. Yeah, even John Roberts said we all have to buy healthcare, you get a penalty, until that was kind of revised. The government charges people money every day. You want to enter a government park, you want to mail an envelope, you want to apply for a copyright, you want to sue somebody, you got to pay. Because a person has no core private right to engage in these activities, the government is not subject to a due process problem, saying that you're depriving somebody of a right. All of these types of taxes or payments, fees, are allowed. A person had no core private right to import goods at the founding. So it's not life, liberty, or property. You don't have life, liberty, or property interest in importations. On the founders' understanding, statutes allowed regulations over the importations. And that's what's happening here. So the power to impose duties on imports is not implicating any of these constitutional concerns. Even the strongest critics of delegation, Thomas says I'm a big one, have recognized that regulations of foreign commerce are not ordinary non-delegation issues. And so if you add it all up and then look at the history, it confirms Congress can actually delegate it. Since the 1790s, they've done it. The first Congress did it with the Indians. Succeeding early Congresses also delegated many more powers over foreign commerce to the president. 1794, Congress delegated to the president the power to lay an embargo on all ships and vessels coming into the ports of the United States. In 1794 again, June 4th, authorized the president to make these regulations based on the circumstances that are necessary. 1798, they did it again. 1799, they did it again. 1800, another one. So Congress has delegated this many times over. In 1815, they did it. And in 1824. And it goes on and on and on. So this court, until today, has consistently upheld Congress's powers to delegate their power when it comes to foreign commerce. The court has long conveyed to Congress that it may invest in the president large discretion in matters when you're dealing with foreign powers. And when Congress did do these delegations, the court upheld those delegations. They upheld it in the Clark case. They upheld it in J.W. Hampton's case. They upheld it in Federal Energy Administration's case. And on and on and on. And so this delegation was very clearly constitutional. The statute at issue in these cases, AIPA, delegates broad powers to the president. They did it, and he used it. Congress delegated to the president a version of the same power that we have been delegating since the founding of the country. And therefore, it complied with separation of powers. It did not need to exercise that power and did not need to delegate it unambiguously, even though, as Justice Kavanaugh explains, it did. The principal opinion here bases its decision on the major questions doctrine. And that's just basically like, it's too big for you to do this thing. In some cases, the court has used the major questions doctrine as a canon of interpretation because delegations of major powers are unlikely to be subtle. Look at Biden versus Nebraska. And in other cases, the court has used it to avoid what would have originally understood as an unconstitutional delegation. So in other words, it's kind of like a catch-all. It's a little bit too big for me. I'm really uncomfortable with the president exercising all his power. It's not clear enough. I don't really like how the law was written. So neither the text nor the Constitution provides a basis for ruling against Trump. And so Clarence Thomas says, I respectfully dissent. Now we get to the main. We've got Judge Kavanaugh writing the majority dissent, or the primary dissent, joined by Thomas and joined by Alito, the three amigos over here in the dissent, saying, acting pursuant to his authority, writes Kavanaugh, the president imposed tariffs. Tariffs have generated a bunch of vigorous policy debates. Those policy debates, though, are not for us to discuss. That's not our job. Saying the judiciary is limited. We should be neutral. We should interpret and apply the law. The only question we should be asking here is whether under AIPA, tariffs are meant to regulate importation. Are they? What do tariffs do? They regulate importation. It's a fee on importation of products. That's a regulation. And it's literally about importing items. So the text, the history, and the precedent all say that answer is clearly yes. Like quotas and embargoes, tariffs are a traditional and common tool. We've used them for a long time. Since early history, Congress has regularly authorized the president to put tariffs on imports. Presidents have used that authority to get leverage with foreign nations, help American manufacturers and workers compete on a more level playing field, and even generate revenue for the U.S. Numerous laws, like the Trade Expansion Act of 1962 and the Trade Act of 1974, continue to authorize the president to place tariffs on foreign imports in a variety of circumstances, okay? So even though AIPA is being disclaimed here as a source of power, we still have this act right here, Trade Expansion Act 1962, Trade Act 1974. Those allow the president to place tariffs. Bush did it. Obama did it. Biden did it. They've all imposed tariffs on foreign imports under those authorities. So Kavanaugh is saying, here's the escape hatch. All right. You don't need to use IEEPA. Use the Trade Expansion Act. Use the Trade Act. Do what Bush did. Do what Obama did. Just go back, revert, write a different authority. Well, we're just going to follow this law rather than this law. Trump has done this. He used the IEEPA. He declared a national emergency. The law says when you declare an emergency, you can use this power. Most relevant in this case is the power to regulate importation. And Trump did exactly that. In early 25, he declared two national emergencies. One was about drug trafficking. It is an emergency. We have got Americans dropping dead all over the place. The other emergency involved trade imbalances. We also have our country being hollowed out. And if we can't manufacture artillery, that's a pretty big problem for our national security. So the plaintiffs now argue, and the court concludes that he lacks the authority to do this. He says, I disagree. In accord with another careful judge's persuasive opinion in the federal circuit, I would conclude this power does exist. And as a matter of ordinary meaning, the dictionary is very clear. Regulate importation means a bunch of things: quotas, embargoes, and tariffs. In fact, even Nixon did it in 1971. He put a 10% tariff on almost all foreign imports. He levied the tariffs under the IEEPA and the predecessor statute, which was called Trading with the Enemy Act. And his tariffs were upheld in court. But he's not Trump, is he? And so Trump is a whole different can of worms because they hate him. Moreover, in 1976, a year before this was enacted, the court unanimously ruled that a very similarly worded statute authorized the president to adjust the imports. President Ford did it too. Both the Nixon tariffs and the Ford tariffs were upheld by this court, in this case called Algonquin, and was allowed to happen. The authorization for the president to impose tariffs did not grant the president any new power. Since the founding, we've done this many times. The president can't impose tariffs. We did it for centuries ago. He says, let's talk about this with context and common sense to show how right we are. The plaintiffs in the court acknowledge, everyone acknowledges, AIPA authorizes the president to impose quotas, okay? Or embargoes on foreign imports, meaning that a president could completely block some or all imports, which is a weird outcome. But they say that AIPA doesn't allow him to employ lesser power of tariffs. So the court is, according to Kavanaugh, conceding that Trump could just cut them all off, which maybe we'll do. Canada, you're cut off. Mexico, you're cut off. Good luck. No remittances either. China, we're done. So he can block all imports, but he can't tariff imports to correct an imbalance of the trade. But they say, no, he can't do that. It's simply a condition of imports on payment. They interpret the statute, the majority, saying the president could, for example, block all imports from China, but he could not order a $1 tariff on goods imported from China, which is weird because that feels like it's kind of a major question, right? So is the whole maybe you should. So is the whole statute now violated because of that interpretation? Maybe Roberts will answer that in the next one. That approach does not make much sense. He says, properly read, AIPA does not draw such an odd distinction between quotas and embargoes and tariffs. It empowers the president to use all the tools traditionally and commonly used. But the court today says no. Says AIPA does not authorize the president to impose any of these tariffs with a declared drug trafficking and trade trafficking emergency. But the court's decision splintered. In today's 6-justice majority, 3 justices, the libs, Kagan, wait for it, Jackson, and Sotomayor, they interpret AIPA not to authorize tariffs because they read it that way. I disagree and will explain on it. But on the other hand, the squishy Republicans, Gorsuch, Barrett, and Roberts, they do lean on the major questions doctrine, and they say it's not clear enough. You want clear congressional authorization for an economic action of major economic and political influence and significance. And they say, in my view, the major questions canon does not control here for 2 reasons. 1, statutory text. There's a clear congressional authorization for this. Throughout American history, presidents have done this. And second, in any event, the court has never before applied a major questions doctrine issue in foreign affairs contexts. This is about foreign power. Rather, as Justice Robert Jackson summarized, this court has always recognized the unwisdom of requiring Congress to narrowly define what the president is allowed to do. And so in foreign affairs cases, courts read the statute as written and didn't employ major questions as it relates to foreign interfaces. Now, although I firmly disagree with the holding today, says Kavanaugh, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. So, in other words, it's kind of a fleeting victory. If Trump wants to use other power, he can. That is because numerous other federal statutes, there you go, authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs at issue here, albeit perhaps with a few additional procedural steps that AIPA does not require. He says they can use these. Just go tap into the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, the Trade Act of 1974, or the Tariff Act of 1930. In essence, the court today concludes the president checked the wrong statutory box. Just filled out the paperwork wrong. He could have just used those others. He relied on AIPA rather than another statute. We'll see if the administration comes back down and just says, oh, perfect. A new order, new executive order under the Tariff Act of 1930. You're all getting hit with now. It was 10% before. Now it's 20, punks. In the meantime, however, the interim effects of this court's decision could be substantial. And we haven't decided this. We read through Roberts' majority opinion, and he didn't order, refunds for all the tariffs currently paid. But Kavanaugh says this could be a big problem. The United States may be required to refund billions of dollars to importers who paid the tariffs, even though some of those importers have already passed the costs on to us. As was acknowledged at oral arguments, the refund process is likely to be a mess. And in addition, according to the government, the tariffs have helped facilitate trade deals worth trillions of dollars, including with foreign nations from China to the UK to Japan. And so now this reversal is going to undermine those trade deals. But he says in any event, the only issue before the court today is one of law. In light of the text, history, and relevant Supreme Court precedent, I would conclude the law authorizes the president to, quote, regulate importation. Why? Because that's what it says, allowing him to impose tariffs on foreign imports and declare national emergencies. And so I, therefore, dissent. Now, he's going to walk us through and flesh out the rest of this argument. Let's see if we can hit some highlights here. First, the people suing say repeatedly, Article 1, Section 8 says tariffs go to the Congress. That rhetoric is a red herring. No one is even disputing that point. We all know it originates with Congress. Got it. Everyone, including the president, agrees that Congress possesses authority under the Constitution over tariffs. Got it. They delegated it. The important principle here, is everyone also acknowledges, is that Congress may in turn authorize the president to impose tariffs. They've done that. And if they're unhappy with it, this is how pathetic Congress is. All of them crying about the tariffs, but they won't do anything about it because they'd rather wait for the courts to come in and save them. Indeed, since the beginning of the Republic, Congress has regularly empowered the president to do these things. All the laws say so. Second, the president does not claim unilateral authority. He's not acting recklessly. He's declaring national emergencies, making his argument for it, relying on a congressional statute, and is acting accordingly. So third, Congress also possesses a variety of tools. Yeah, this is exactly right, but they're too weak and spineless. If they don't like the tariffs, they can go pass new legislation, or they can just not approve annual appropriations to impose the tariffs. Okay, they don't have to change the entire AIPA statute. Just use the power of the purse and defund any enforcement. Now, the House and the Senate and the president annually approve most appropriations, and so they have de facto veto power over particular appropriations, but they won't do it. Of course, many different appropriations items are usually considered and packaged together because they don't want to make rulings on any one thing in Congress. But historically, they've given this power over to him. Everything is related to everything else. And if they want to change this, they can. But they won't. Now, this case is one of a straightforward question of interpretation. Does the law say what it says? He says, obviously, the answer is very clearly yes. And let's go back to the statute. In 1941, a few days after Pearl Harbor, Congress first enacted the relevant language, regulate importation. It was back during the Trading with the Enemies Act. That turned into AIPA. And back then, under the TWEA, regulate meant what it says. Look at Black's Law Dictionary. It included tariffs. All of this is consistent. Trump's not doing anything outside the law. Marshall, Story, Madison, they make a formidable trio of our founders, and this court has long echoed the Marshall, Story, Madison understanding of regulation. What does that mean? Regulate means a bunch of tools. Imports, tariffs, quotas. We've read the list. Now today, the court and the plaintiffs, the squishy Republicans and the three libs, they seize on the word regulate in isolation. They say, no, it means regulate, but that does not mean tariffs. But the relevant phrase is regulate importation. How do you regulate importation? Tariffs. Always been the situation. Now they're trying to limit this, and they're trying to basically force the court to save Congress that doesn't want to impose these tariffs and is too spineless to act about it. Nixon did tariffs, and they applied to almost everything. All imports of foreign goods. They garnered substantial national and international attention, and Nixon's tariffs were generally popular in Congress. But then litigation came out. 2 years later, Congress divided on the tariffs, passed some new legislation, and gives us a lot of the history about how these things came about. Ford also put tariffs on oil. The tariffs in 1976 came to the Supreme Court, and it's basically the same argument. They argued that Ford imposed monetary exactions, and this is way too broad. But these courts acknowledged that this was an issue. The Supreme Court decided the tariff case in 1976 and unanimously reversed and said, yep, adjust the imports meant, even though it did not include terms like tariff, tax, and duty, still gave him the authority to do it. So since they hate Trump, they just are abandoning all their precedent. And he continues. Now, the court today tries to distinguish this. They say, well, there was broader language there that's not necessarily here. And they're trying to brush aside the precedent that the Supreme Court has already ruled on. So to sum up everything, writes Kavanaugh, when enacting AIPA in 77, Congress employed the exact language recently invoked by Nixon, and it's the same model. They upheld Nixon, they upheld Ford, but now, for whatever reason, they're going the opposite direction. Talking about President Polk and President Lincoln, lifting blockades. A lot of history here. The president has these powers for important things like the Spanish-American War. What does wartime history matter? Well, because when Congress first enacted the Trading with the Enemy Act in 1917 during World War I, it codified some of the president's inherent wartime powers. And that makes it unlawful to import goods and services from a named country that might be a problem if we're at war with them. Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, had a lot of the same power too. Therefore, the language is not new. AIPA is not inventing something out of whole cloth. Far from it. It's now codifying the same wartime powers and the same emergency power as Polk, Lincoln, McKinley, and many other examples like Nixon and Ford have all used. In short, Congress enacted the same regulation to accomplish the same thing. Many more examples: 1810, 1890, 1922, 1930, 1962, 1974, and many other sections support the same. 301, 122, 2132. So to be sure, given those other statutes also authorize the president to impose foreign tariffs, one might reasonably ask, why did the president need distinct tariff authority under AIPA during peacetime emergencies, or for that matter, under the TIWA during wartime? To answer that would be because we're declaring an emergency. Under wartime, you have powers. Under emergency civil times, you have powers. But it's not surprising that this power exists because it's codified all over the place. And finally, all that text, all that history, all those presidents, all those statutes, it's further reinforced by two pieces of context. First, AIPA, interpreting it to exclude tariffs, creates a nonsensical law. If quotas and embargoes are a means to regulate importation, how are tariffs not a means? And it does not make any more sense the president can declare a national emergency, can literally shut off all imports, but can't impose a $1 tariff. And this was not debated in a vacuum. Congress looked at it. They've looked at it for hundreds of years now, and regulate importation means what it says. So we're interpreting this ordinarily. The court today does not claim that the phrase regulate importation excludes tariffs. They just basically say it's too much tariffs. It's too impactful. And so it implicates a major questions doctrine. Even Justice Scalia articulated the canonical statement of the major questions doctrine. He said, "We expect Congress to speak clearly if it wishes to assign an agency decision of vast economic and political significance. Stated otherwise, where there are major political and significant impacts, we got to have clear authorization from Congress." Kavanaugh says, I agree. This is major. There are going to be major political significant things happening. That's a trigger to have clear authorization. But in my view, it's there. The statute says clearly regulate importation. Don't need to twist yourself into a pretzel to try to interpret it. So how can regulate importation not include tariffs? It makes no sense. It is in the magic words of, like, you want to see the word tariff in there, like you have to put that in there. We don't need it. It's already been adjudicated. The doctrine precludes fundamental revisions of the statute. We had COVID problems and all this other case law, very long dissent. So we have to apply these factors. What does regulate importation actually mean? Kavanaugh keeps going and going and going. And let's fast forward through some of it. He's talking about Biden saying it's not a major questions doctrine. Ooh, this is good. John Roberts' opinions approach to the major questions doctrine is not a major questions doctrine. It's a magic words test under another name. You have to see the word tariff in there if you can do this, even though it's never been required, historically speaking. But this court has never before applied the major questions doctrine or anything even resembling it to a foreign affairs statute. And I would not make this case the first. Rather, in foreign affairs, this court has interpreted statutes with deference to the president. This is new, though. This is extraordinary. And this approach embodied by John Roberts is going to extend this major questions doctrine into foreign affairs and shackle the presidency accordingly. It doesn't impose any problems with separation of powers. Clarence Thomas explained that. Other judges have interpreted this correctly in prior Supreme Court precedent. And if major questions is meant to protect non-delegation, and this isn't a problem with non-delegation based on precedent, then what is the major questions actually accomplishing here? To be clear, Congress, of course, maintains the ultimate power, 100%, over how broadly or narrowly to write these statutes. Congress can write these narrowly if they want to. And they didn't. When they want to legislate more broadly, they can. And historically, when they've over-delegated, they've clawed some of it back. So in short, this court has never before imposed major questions on foreign affairs. This is a foreign case and foreign matter. Even other professors agree with us. And this is all very consistent with the history and the practice that we've seen. He keeps going and going and going, saying there can be little doubt that questions of suspending citizens' claims, which was allowed, is embodied in this doctrine. Now, having said all of that, I reiterate that the major questions doctrine, even if it applies in foreign affairs, it doesn't defeat major actions that are clearly authorized by Congress. And finally, he says, no member of this court today relies on the non-delegation doctrine, but the plaintiffs briefly raise it, and so I'll address it, just like Clarence Thomas did, saying, here, this court's decision is instructive, and we see as we get to the end of the decision, all of that and much more, in my view, overwhelmingly establishes the law authorizes Trump to do the things. He can pass tariffs. Now, that said, with respect to tariffs in particular, the court's decision might not prevent the president from imposing most, if not all, of the same tariffs under other authorities. Just go back. He's giving like a roadmap for Trump. Go to Section 122 of the Trade Act. That authorizes a president to do it. Go to 19 U.S. Code. Section 201. That allows you to do it. If an article is being imported and there's a substantial cause of injury, like drugs, then you can do something about it. The president may take appropriate and feasible action. Section 301 of 1974 says you can impose duties over here. Section 338, Section D, 1862. And so the court's decision today is not likely to greatly restrict presidential tariff authority going forward, but the court's decision is likely to generate other serious practical consequences in the near term. One will be refunds. Refunds of billions of dollars would have significant consequences for the Treasury. The court says nothing today about whether, and if so, how the government should go about returning billions of dollars that it got from importers. But that process is likely to be a mess. Everyone agrees. A second issue is the decision and the effect of it on the current trade deals. Because AIPA tariffs have facilitated trade deals worth trillions of dollars, including with China, UK, and Japan, this decision is going to cause uncertainty as it relates to those matters. And so Kavanaugh concludes, the tariffs at issue here may or may not be wise policy. But as a matter of text, history, and precedent, they are clearly lawful, and so I respectfully dissent. So 6-3, you see the decision feels like it's a major blow by the Supreme Court, but Kavanaugh just gave us like 70 pages of details about why the president has many other powers and authorities that the president can rely on in order to continue to secure America's interest. The fact that John Roberts is in favor of a tax domestically when it's a mandate, forcing you to go buy health care to support Obamacare, but he's opposed to a tax when it's importing goods and services that wreck and hollow out the country, tell you a lot about what's going on in his brain. But let's see if the president responded to this. I had this queued up earlier, waiting to hear from him. And haven't seen anything from him yet. Wanted to see if we got anything from Peter Navarro on this, senior counselor for trade and manufacturing this morning from Peter Navarro. Nothing there yet. We saw Trump was out yesterday and he was at a steel factory, and listen to this man talk about how good this has been for American domestic steel. Now, of course, the Supreme Court reversing the AIPA tariffs and the powers that the president was claiming under those, but hopefully Trump comes back out and continues to deliver for this man and for America.
This gentleman has a now great company. He was in big trouble 2 years ago, and then I put on the tariffs, and now he's going round the clock, making the racks, making the steel, making everything that he makes. And it's just amazing what's happened. that anybody can be complaining about tariffs. He just said, I'd give you a big hug if the press wasn't out here, because the tariffs have really been a big difference.
It's been a game changer. We were competing with China. They had taken all of it. They were producing racks at $90 a piece. Our cost alone is $150. You've leveled it. The playing field's back.
So when I came in and we did what we had to do to save all these businesses, you went through the roof, right?
We did. Our quotes, our orders. We're so busy now, we don't know what to do. My lead time now on an order is 36 weeks. We were at a point in time with our racks division, we were laying off workers. We were working one shift, 3 days a week, begging for work. Now it's the exact opposite.
He's turning work
We're turning work down, which is a position that nobody wants to be in, but it's the reality of what your tariffs have done.
Honestly, you've got thousands of businesses all over the country the same
All
thing. We've taken it away. They were ripping us off. Every country in the world was ripping us off.
They were, and the Supreme Court's okay with that because, like, well, it's a little too scary what Trump's doing. I can't believe he's doing this without clear authorization, even though he's clearly authorized to do it. Now we're waiting for the president right now to come out and address this. And so we'll keep it locked right here until he does. And let's see what you guys say about all this as we wait for the president to emerge on the day. We have another segment to get to, and that's going to be in the Fulton County case. But let's see what's cooking over here first. Let's turn some volume up, see if we got anything happening here. Don't know when he'll be out exactly. But things are pretty quiet. We're all waiting. All right, let's see what you guys say about this. I think I saw some donos come in. Thank you for sending those in. And let's see who's here on the day. What a lovely morning it is. Nice to see you, my friends. All right, so we got some donos that came in. We have this little battle here that's brewing between Daffy and Bugs Bunny. Tariffs are off. Tariffs are on. Tariffs are off. Tariffs are on. And around we go. Good to see you there. Thank you for that one, Muffin Rando, modding the fort down for us. We got Ellen Miloni. What's up, Ellen Miloni in the house? Welcome aboard, our newest supporter. Great to see you. And we'll be back tomorrow, Saturday, with our members-only Saturday stream. Thank you for joining us. Going to be probably later tomorrow because we got a late night tonight. We're coming back here to stream all night, and it's going to be a fun one. So we'll be later tomorrow on our members-only stream because your boy's probably going to be in a stupor. But, all right, so let's put this in here, and then let's pop out our video feed so that we do not miss a thing. Waiting for the president to come out, and it's quiet in that room. It's almost like, you know, dad's coming home and he's about to just scream at everybody. Everyone's like, oh gosh, we're in trouble. Dad's coming home. Dad's coming out. Off-Label Podcast. What's going on, Off-Label? Great to see you. Thank you for being here, and shout out to our friend Off-Label right next door. 586 amazing videos. Voice of the People says, seems those that voted no on the government officials confirming aliens this year on poly market may lose their money. I say Trump says something during the State of the Union next Tuesday. Yeah, that's another thing that happened today. Trump saying he's going to unseal a bunch of the alien files. The age of disclosure may be upon us. We'll see if he says anything about it next week, but he did make a post about that last night. And Hegseth also said the same. Hegseth said, we're going to start releasing them. What do you guys think? Are there aliens? Yes or no? It's a good question. Hey, Cat, we all just get along? Good to see you, Cat. We all just get along. Looking forward to tonight's show. Man, so are we. Yeah, it's going to be great. We should have, I think Miranda Devine's coming. I think John Solomon's going to come on. And it's in conjunction with the Empower Oversight law firm. They represented the IRS whistleblowers. And so they're launching a documentary, and your boy's going to help reveal it, or whatever I'm doing. I don't know. Kat, we all just get along. Good to see you. Thank you. Thanks for being a member, too. 37 months. That's a long time. Mr. Don, what's up? There goes the SCOTUS is in Trump's pocket argument. I know. They keep saying that all the time. Listening to the conversation. Here. Mr. Doan, I know, it's... Here we go. Okay, let me go back to the main tab. Oh, gosh, what did I just do? Okay, here it is.
Wow. That's a lot of people. That's a new record. We set a record every time. Well, thank you very much for being here. The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court, absolutely ashamed, for not having the courage to do what's right for our country.
Gorsuch, Roberts, and Amy.
I'd like to thank and congratulate Justices Thomas, Alito, and Kavanaugh for their strength and wisdom and love of our country, which is right now very proud of those justices. When you read the dissenting opinions, there's no way that anyone can argue against them.
Right.
There's no way. Foreign countries that have been ripping us off for years are ecstatic. They're so happy. And they're dancing in the streets, but they won't be dancing for long. That I can assure you. The Democrats on the court are thrilled, but they will automatically vote no. They're an automatic no, just like in Congress. They're an automatic no. They're against anything that makes America strong, healthy, and great again. They also are a, frankly, disgrace to our nation, those justices. They're an automatic no, no matter how good a case you have. It's a no.
They're liberals.
You can't knock their loyalty. It's one thing you can do with some of our people. Others think they're being politically correct, which has happened before far too often with certain members of this court, and it's happened so often with this court. What a shame. Having to do with voting in particular, when in fact they're just being fools and lapdogs for the rhinos and the radical left Democrats, and not that this should have anything at all to do with it. They're very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. It's my opinion that the court has been swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think. It's a small movement. I won by millions of votes. We won in a landslide. With all the cheating that went on, there was a lot of it, but we still won in a landslide. Too big to rig. But these people are obnoxious, ignorant, and loud. They're very loud.
The globalists.
And I think certain justices are afraid of that. They don't want to do the right thing. They're afraid of it. This was an important case to me, more as a symbol of economic national security, and also, I would say, just for our country itself, so important, because we're doing so well as a country. We've never done so well. The good news is that there are methods, practices, statutes, and authorities, as recognized by the entire court in this terrible decision, and also as recognized by Congress, which they refer to, that are even stronger than the AIPA tariffs available to me as President of the United States. And in actuality, I was very modest in my ask of other countries and businesses because I wanted to do, and it's very important, I wanted to be very well behaved because I wanted to do anything, I didn't want to do anything that would affect the decision of the court, because I understand the court. I understand how they are very easily swayed. I want to be a good boy. I have very effectively utilized tariffs over the past year to make America great again. Our stock market has just recently broken 50,000 on the Dow, and simultaneously, and even more amazingly, broken 7,000 on the S&P, two numbers that everybody thought upon our landslide election victory could not be attained. Think of that. Nobody thought it was possible to do it within 4 years, and we did it in 1 year. They said, you'll never be able, you'll go back and you read the geniuses, read their statements, all of the Nobel Prize winners in economics. They said, no, you couldn't do it in 4 years. Well, we didn't do it in 4 years. We did it in 1 year. We broke every record in the book, and we're continuing to do so. Tariffs have likewise been used to end 5 of the 8 wars that I settled. I settled 8 wars, whether you like it or not, including India, Pakistan, big ones, nuclear, could have been nuclear. Prime Minister of Pakistan said yesterday at the great meeting that we had, the Peace Board, he said yesterday that President Trump could have saved 35 million lives by getting us to stop fighting. They were getting ready to do some bad things. But they've given us great national security, these tariffs have. And together with our strong borders, reduced fentanyl coming into our country by 30%. When I use them as a penalty against countries illegally sending this poison into our country to poison our youth. All of those tariffs remain. They all remain. I don't know if you know that or not. They all remain. We're still getting them, and we will after the decision. I guess there's nobody left to appeal to. But again, those 3 people, such respect. I've had a lot of respect for them anyway, but such great respect. But other alternatives will now be used to replace the ones that the court incorrectly rejected. We have alternatives, great alternatives.
Many alternatives.
Could be more money. We'll take in more money, and we'll be a lot stronger for it. We're taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. We'll continue to do so. To show you how ridiculous the opinion is, however, the court said that I'm not allowed to charge even $1. I can't charge $1. Can't charge $1. I would have used 1 penny, but we don't make the pennies anymore. We save money. Can't charge $1 to any country under AIPA. Not $1. I assume to protect other countries. This must have been done to protect those other countries, certainly not the United States of America, which they should be interested in protecting. That's what they're supposed to be protecting. But I am allowed to cut off any and all trade or business with that same country. In other words, I can destroy the trade. I can destroy the country. I'm even allowed to impose a foreign country destroying embargo. I can embargo. I can do anything I want, but I can't charge $1. Because that's not what it says. And that's not the way it even reads. I can do anything I want to do to them, but I can't charge any money. So I'm allowed to destroy the country, but I can't charge them a little fee. I could give them a little 2-cent fee, but I cannot charge under any circumstances. I cannot charge them anything. Think of that. How ridiculous is that? I'm allowed to embargo them. I'm allowed to tell them you can't do business in the United States anymore. We want you out of here. But if I want to charge them $10, I can't do that. It's incorrect. Their decision's incorrect. But it doesn't matter because we have very powerful alternatives that have been approved by this decision. You know, they've been approved by the decision for those that thought they had us. And they're saying that I have the absolute right to license, but not the right to charge a license fee. So think of that. I have the right to license, which is a very powerful word. In many ways, license is more powerful than tariffs. In fact, I was thinking about using it. But they came up with the idea that I can license, just like the people that were opposing me told them to do, but not the right to charge a license fee. Think of that. Who ever heard of such a thing? What license has ever been issued without the right to charge a fee? You get a license, you charge a fee. It's automatic, but not with this court. But now the court has given me the unquestioned right to ban all sorts of things from coming into our country, to destroy foreign countries, but a much more powerful right than many people ever thought we even had, but not the right to charge a fee. How crazy is that? Our country is the hottest country anywhere in the world right now. And it was a dead country 1.5 years ago under an incompetent president. But now I'm going to go in a different direction, probably the direction that I should have gone the first time, but I read the language. I'm very good at reading language, and it read our way 100%, but now I'll go the way I could have gone originally, which is even stronger than our original choice. As Justice Kavanaugh, whose stock has gone so well, you have to see, I'm so proud of him, wrote in his dissent, although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward.
Just read it.
So,
many options.
Think of that. The decision might not substantially constrain. And it doesn't. He's right. In fact, I can charge much more than I was charging.
Maybe he should.
So I'm going to just start. Although I firmly disagree with the court's holding today, the decision might not substantially constrain a president's ability to order tariffs going forward. That's because numerous other federal statutes, which is so true, authorize the president to impose tariffs and might justify most, if not all, of the tariffs issued in this case. Even more tariffs, actually. Those statutes include, think of that, those statutes include, for example, the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 232. All of these things I know so well. The Trade Act of 1974, Sections 122, 201, 301. And the Tariff Act of 1930, Section 338, all clear. But it's a little bit longer process. I thought I'd make things simple, but they didn't let us do that. I would like to thank Justice Kavanaugh for frankly, his genius and his great ability. Very proud of that appointment. In actuality, while I am sure that they did not mean to do so, the Supreme Court's decision today made a president's ability to both regulate trade and impose tariffs more powerful and more crystal clear rather than less. I don't think they meant that. I'm sure they didn't. It's terrible. And to think that the Democrats who oppose this only because they want to go the opposite way, they'd like to pack the court. They want to put on 21 people. They want to pack the court, pack the Supreme Court. Maybe they should do it. Maybe they would be better off if they did it. They want to pack the court. They want to do anything to hurt our country.
We'll be doomed.
There will no longer be any doubt, and the income coming in and the protection of our companies and country will actually increase because of this decision. I don't think the court meant that, but it's the way it is. Based on long-standing law and hundreds of victories, and even, as I was pointed out before, even thousands of victories over the years, to the contrary, the Supreme Court did not overrule tariffs. They merely overruled a particular use of AIPA tariffs. And essentially, it's used to get a fee. I can do anything I want with AIPA, anything. I just can't charge anybody for it. I can license, I just can't charge them. It's ridiculous, but it's okay because we have other ways, numerous other ways. The ability to block, embargo, restrict, license, or impose any other condition on a foreign country's ability to conduct trade with the United States under AIPA has been fully confirmed by this decision. So now there's no doubt, because, you know, there were a lot of questions about tariffs because no president was smart enough to use them to protect our country from those countries and businesses that were ripping us off. You took a look at the deficits that we had with some of these countries. It was disgraceful what they got away with for many, many decades. But now we know, because this decision affirms all those things that some people weren't sure about. In order to protect, and it says so, in order to protect our country, a president can actually charge more tariffs than I was charging in the past period of a year under the various tariff authorities. So we can use other of the statutes, other of the tariff authorities, which have also been confirmed and are fully allowed. Therefore, effective immediately,
Here we go.
all national security tariffs under Section 232 and existing Section 301 tariffs, they're existing, they're there, remain in place, fully in place, and in full force and effect. Today, I will sign an order to impose a 10% global tariff under Section 122 over and above our normal tariffs already being charged.
Eat it.
And we're also initiating several Section 301 and other investigations to protect our country from unfair trading practices of other countries and companies. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
Thank you,
and
Mr. President.
I say quite simply, which I've said for a long time, make America great again. And interestingly, we've already made it great, so I don't have to use that, but I don't think we'll ever give up on MAGA. MAGA is always going to be with us.
That's right.
If you have a few questions, you can let us know. But just to end, so we're going forward, we will be able to take in more money, and there'll no longer be doubt, because there was always doubt. I know the people that brought the lawsuit, and they're sleazebags, major sleazebags.
Yeah, true.
But I know them, and they're foreign country centric. They were sending things into our country, and the people representing them knew full well, but they were sending things into our country, and they were beneficial to other countries, but very, very bad for us. And I stopped it, and we'll just keep it going. So we have we have a totally firm decision now, and I don't think the court meant it, because the court doesn't show great spirit toward our country, in my opinion. A lot of bad decisions, but there are usually ways around it. This is something we could have done, as Justice Kavanaugh said, we could have done this originally, but we're doing it now. And the numbers could be far greater than the hundreds of billions we've already taken in.
10%
Yeah,
across
please.
the board.
Thank you, Mr.
President Trump.
President. Mr. President, I'm very curious. You've
I didn't
spoken
call
about
you in the red.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Justice Thomas and Alito, as you know, are the most conservative constitutional justices. Do you think that you'll get to appoint 2 more justices later this term with similar ideologies? And what type of vetting process will they go through to ensure they uphold
I don't know, but they're
the
great
Constitution?
justices. That's all I can say. And I hope they're going to be around a long time. I hope they're going to stay healthy. They're great people. They're great. And Justice Alito, too, to add to the group. These are great men.
Right.
With a great love of our country and a great understanding of the law.
How you like that, John Roberts?
Congress to take additional action on tariffs now? Have you
No, I don't
spoken
need to. It's already been approved.
Done.
I mean, I would ask Congress and probably get it. When people look at the real numbers, and you look at hundreds of billions of dollars that have come into our country. Yesterday, I was at a steel plant, as you know, and I went to great place, great plant, great, wonderful people. And they were telling me, I said to them, you were there, a lot of the press in this room. Of course, I don't think this plane's big enough to take the press in this room, but a lot of the press right here. We were in Georgia. And I said to the owner, I made a speech at a factory. They make steel products. And I said, how are you? Nice to meet you. How's business? President, I'd love to kiss you. This is a very powerful man. I don't want to be kissed by that man, but a very powerful, strong man. He's been in the steel business for many years. His father started it. And he said, sir, I want to kiss you. I said, why? He said, because we were down to working 1 hour a week, and then you came in and imposed tariffs, and all of that foreign junk that they were dropping into our country stopped. And we're now going to double shifts, 7 days a week, and we may be very soon going to 24 hours around the clock, almost 7 days a week.
Domestic
He
production.
said, sir, I want to kiss you so badly. And I said, no, thank you. but you know what? He just to finalize it, he said, oh, this is a great place in Georgia. He said, all up and down the highway, same exact answer, sir. We're all going out of business. We're going to go bankrupt. We're all going out of business. And now every one of us are thriving, and we're hiring people like we haven't. He said, like I've never, and he's been in business for, I think, 45 years, like we've never hired before. That's because of tariffs. And we're going to keep it going the same way.
And you're going to start to see the results in a year from now when all those factories start that are under construction right now. You see all the construction numbers are so good. Those construction workers are building factories that are going to be open, including not only AI, which is big, but car plants coming in from Canada, who ripped us off for 30% of our market. Mexico ripped us off for a big portion. Over the years, they've taken our market. They've taken our cars. They manufacture them in Japan, Germany, and all over the place.
China.
Because nobody's standing in this position. The position I have as President of the United States had the insight, the courage, well, I don't know what it is, to charge tariffs. You can make your product outside. You can put our people out of business. You can put everybody on the unemployment rolls. But if you're going to make a car in some other country, you're going to pay a 15, 20, 30% tariff. And those things would have never happened. We wouldn't have lost our business. Same thing with, as an example, Taiwan. Taiwan came in. They stole our chip business. They make chips. For 30 years longer, they made chip. And they put our companies. Intel would be now the largest company. I saved Intel. I literally saved it at the beginning of this administration. And now all those companies in Taiwan are building factories in Arizona, Texas, and various other places because they don't want to pay tariffs. They're all pouring into the United States. But just like that great patriot said yesterday, sir, what you've done, nobody thought was possible. And Steve Moore, a highly respected economist, came into my office yesterday. He said, you've done something nobody's ever done. 22 Nobel Prize winners in economics said we would right now be in a recession. And you said, no, we're going to have a booming country. We're going to have a booming country. You were right. All 22 were wrong, and you were right. This country is booming, and it's booming because of the election on November 5th, and it's booming for another reason. It's booming because of tariffs. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. What was said ahead of this decision that if the Supreme Court
please,
ruled...
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. What will you say to foreign nations who seek to renegotiate their deals? And what did you mean a moment ago when you said that the Supreme Court has been swayed by foreign interests?
Well, I think that foreign interests are represented by people that I believe have undue influence. They have a lot of influence over the Supreme Court, whether it's through fear or respect or friendships, I don't know. But I know some of the people that were involved on the other side, and I don't like them. I think they're real slime balls. And got to do what's right for the country. You got to do what's right for the Constitution. That's why I respect so much Justice Thomas and Alito, Kavanaugh, because they not only dissented, their dissent is so strong. When you read their dissent, you know, a lot of times you'll read a dissent and it's like, well, you don't know, it could go either way. There's no other way. The good news is, it's like Justice Kavanaugh said, very strongly said, you have other ways you can go. You don't have to go that way. You can go other way. There are numerous other ways you can go. And frankly, this should have been done by presidents many years ago. They allowed our country to be eaten alive. We lost 50% of our car business. We used to make cars. We made all the cars. And then Mexico came, Canada came, and Japan and Germany. But they're all coming back now. They're all coming back at record levels. No, please. I'm not talking to you. I don't talk to CNN. It's fake news. Go ahead.
Mr. President, yesterday you made the case that the economy is the hottest it's been in a long time.
Right.
January jobs report beat expectations. CPI report beat expectations. Real wages are up. What would you tell Americans who are worried that this decision will kind of throw the economy that you have projected going in the right direction at a very rapid pace off track?
Well, thank you for the question. And I will say this. We really are at a very important point. I've been waiting for this decision so long. They could have made this decision a long time ago. Not complex. They're wrong on it. It's a ridiculous decision. But they should have released this a long time ago. We waited months. And that gave uncertainty. Now we have certainty. And I think you're going to see the country get much stronger because of it. Look, we were ripped off by almost every country in the world. If you look at the surpluses, almost every country in the world that did business with us, our people were stupid. And I blame presidents for it because they're ultimately the leader. We were being ripped off by almost every single country in the world, had some massive surpluses. China had hundreds of billions of dollars in surpluses with the United States. They rebuilt China. They rebuilt the army. We built China's army by allowing that to happen. I have a great relationship with President Xi, but he respects our country now. Now, what we've done, I charged China a 20% tariff as a penalty for sending fentanyl in. And that was 20 times more than they could make by selling fentanyl. And I said, you know, at some point you're going to say, like, and they have reduced it. You know, fentanyl is down by more than 30% coming into our country. Part of that is our strong border. We have a strong border now. But thank you. Thank you for your question.
Mr. President, sir, you warned once in a social media post that if the Supreme Court did this, shot down your tariffs, the U.S. would be, quote, financially defenseless. Are we financially defenseless right now?
No, because we're doing something in a different way. We're doing something in a very powerful way. And we're using things that some people thought we should have used in the first place. But it's more complicated. It's a little more complicated. The process takes a little more time. But the end result is going to get us more money. And I think it's going to be great. Yeah, please. Peter, go ahead.
Thank you, President Trump. So, since Liberation Day, there's about $175 billion in tariff revenue that is now in limbo. Do you have to refund $175 billion?
Think of it, Peter. Very fair question. They take months and months to write an opinion, and they don't even discuss that point.
Right.
We've taken in hundreds of billions of dollars, not millions, hundreds of billions of dollars. And so I said, well, what happens to all the money that we took in? It wasn't discussed. Wouldn't you think they would have put one sentence in there saying that keep the money or don't keep the money, right? I guess it has to get litigated for the next 2 years. So they write this terrible, defective decision, totally defective. It's almost like not written by smart people. And what they do, they don't even talk about that. Your question is very basic. That was the first question I asked also to make you feel good. I said, what about all the money that we've taken in? Sir, they don't discuss that. How crazy is that?
What you're saying is, are you saying that you don't plan to honor refunds for companies that file for them?
I just told you the answer, right? I told you the answer. It's not discussed. We'll end up being in court for the next 5 years. Go ahead, Green.
Thank you, Mr. President. When you are talking about the relationship with countries that you have sought trade deals with, do you anticipate that they will seek to renegotiate those? What do you say to them? And do you view this as a potential undermining power for your negotiations?
We're going straight ahead with 10% straight across the board, which was the absolute right to do. And that's taking place. That's a lot of money coming into our country. And then during that period of about 5 months, we are doing the various investigations necessary to put fair tariffs or tariffs, period, on other countries. So we're doing that period, but we're immediately instituting the 10% provision, which we're allowed to do. And in the end, I think we'll take in more money than we've taken in before.
Mr. President, you've used the tariff revenue to pay for a host of federal policies. You've claimed that they will pay for them. What happens to
Well, like
those
the
things?
farmers, we took care of farmers. You know, the farmers were mistreated by foreign countries very badly, very, very badly. And last week I gave them $12 billion out of tariff money. We intend to, out of tariff money, because just so you understand, we have tariffs. We just have them in a different way. And now they've been confirmed by the Supreme Court of the United States. So there's no longer that question out there about tariffs. And we'll be taking in hundreds of billions of dollars. And countries that have treated us badly will have to pay a price for treating us badly. And countries that have been good to us will be treated very well. We just left the top person in a place called Vietnam, just left my office. Great gentleman, strong and smart. He said, you know, I think this means you're allowed to charge us more tariffs than before.
Yeah.
And Canada said to Jameson, I might want to say it, Jameson, but Canada said, I hope you win this decision, because if you don't win, you'll actually be allowed to charge us, with a little additional work, higher tariffs. Jameson, you want to comment on that?
Yes, sir. So to the President's point, we have a lot of tools out there. We have Section 122, which will be implemented today. It will be signed today and implemented very shortly. We have Section 301 investigations, which are incredibly legally durable, where we can investigate and address unfair trading practices that have led to our huge trade deficit. And so you can look forward in the coming days and weeks to seeing all of that come out, and we're going to keep continuity in the program. We're going to keep addressing this so that the deficit can keep going down. That's the trend it has, and we can make America great again.
Tariff.
Several of Republicans in Congress have supported this decision by the Supreme Court, and Hakeem Jeffries, the Democratic leader, has called you a wannabe king. Why wouldn't
him a low IQ?
But why wouldn't
he doesn't even know? And I watched him the other day interview. The guy doesn't even know what a tariff is.
But there's been bipartisan criticism.
No, not bipartisan.
Of the tariffs.
Excuse me.
There's several
A few
Republicans
people
have said that.
Yeah,
But
a
why
few people.
wouldn't you just work with Congress to come up with a plan?
I don't have to
push tariffs.
I have the
through?
right to do
delegated
tariffs,
it, yeah.
and I've always had the right to do tariffs, and it's all been approved by Congress. So there's no reason to do it. All we're doing is we're going through a little bit more complicated process. Not complicated very much, but a little more complicated than what we had. We'll be able to take in tariffs, more tariffs. And the Congress people and the Congress
down the Canadian tariffs last week.
Yeah,
There's been votes in the Senate against it.
Yeah, because we lost 2 Republicans or 3 Republicans because they're not good Republicans. What you don't say, you don't say that we got 215 votes.
You need 218 for something to pass.
Yeah, sure we do. We might have lost 3 votes, and what was the score on the Republican side? 215 to 3, right? But you don't say that. We have great unity. There's great unity in the Republican Party, and I hope everyone's going to vote Republican, because otherwise you won't have a country left, because these people have been they are destroying our country. Please.
Mr. President, the 122 tariffs, that 10%,
yeah.
Is that going to be for 150 days, or do you want to charge that indefinitely?
We have a right to do pretty much what we want to do, but we're going to charge it starting effectively. I think it's 3 days from now. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you speak to a lot of factory workers, a lot of manufacturing workers. What does the Supreme Court ruling say? What's that message to those factory workers?
Well, I think the factory workers are happy because we're now telling them that they're going to look. The man I met with yesterday, who owned a factory, was out of business. He was out of business. And now he's employing 5 times. In fact, I walked in, he's got a brand new crane. I said, how old is that crane? We got it in December. He's allowed to write it off in 1 minute. The Great Big Beautiful Act gave no tax on tips, no tax on Social Security, no tax on overtime. He said this great big beautiful bill, frankly, has been the best thing that's ever happened for the workers much more so than for rich people. The only thing it does for rich people, it allows them to hire a lot more people. But when I saw him, and then he said, it's all up and down the line. This is a place in Georgia, all up and down, other factories doing different, not only steel products, different. He said, every one of us was out of business. We could barely make it. Some of them were down to less than an hour a week. Think of it, 1 hour a week to make just a few little trinkets or whatever they make. Now they're going round the clock. I had it a month ago. I went to Michigan, went to Ford, and I met with Bill Ford, the head of Ford, and we were in one of the biggest plants, an original plant from the early 1900s, where, by the way, I might add this, it's not really relevant, but it's all relevant. Murders are down the lowest since 1900, around the time that he had this plant. That's 125 years. We have the lowest murder rate. Okay. And our crime is way down in the country. The factories that we're talking about, the people that we're talking about, they are so thrilled with Trump. So whether we charge AIPA tariffs or whether we charge tariffs under a different section, that's what we're going to be doing. There's no way we can lever. This is what happened to our country. This is why we owe $38 trillion, which we'll get rid of in pretty good course. We have a very incompetent Fed chairman who likes high interest rates. For political reasons, he likes them. But we're going to have somebody very good. Interest rates should come down very substantially. I think we should pay the lowest interest rates on the planet. There should be no country, and we don't do that. We're number 38. This is just bad policy for a long period of time. But what's happened is we've made America strong again. We've made America great again. We should pay. As an example, the country of Switzerland, we were getting almost no tariffs from them. We had a $40 billion deficit. And the prime minister called me up. She said, but we are a small country, because I said we're going to raise it to 39% from nothing. That would have rendered them not very successful, as opposed to right now they're considered elite. But if we put a tariff, they would, and I realized then, she said, but sir, we are a small country. I said, you're a small country with a big deficit. For us, you're making a lot of money off the United States. If we do that, a lot of these elite countries, they're elite because we let them make so much money. And I want them to do well, but I don't want them to do well on the backs of the American taxpayer. So I appreciate your question. I think it's a reasonable answer.
President Trump, you said that you were disappointed with that, but were you surprised with this decision? What you felt when you...
I was surprised because I thought that what we did was, number one, according to, I mean, I read the paragraphs. I read very well. Great comprehension. I read everything there is to read, and I said, we can't lose this case. But we can when judges are political, when they want to be politically correct, when they're catering to a group of people in D.C. maybe. I don't know what it is, because when you read it, there's no other interpretation. There is no other interpretation. But it's okay, because what has come out, and I'll say it for the third time and maybe the last time in a while, is that we've taken the uncertainty of tariffs out, because we had uncertainty. We got sued by sleazebags, I know them well, that are very outside country, China-centric, but outside country-centric. And they're going to end up not doing as well as they did before. America was becoming really, really, we're strong again. Hey, we have the strongest military. I rebuilt the military in the first term. We have the most powerful military. We make the best equipment. And even them, you know, we could do much better. We have people that get paid a lot of money to manufacture Patriot missiles and javelins and all the different things. But when you want them, they're too slow. And we put them on notice, and they're going to make, our country is building a lot of things right now, and our country is doing really well. And we're going to keep it that way. The bottom line is that the word certainty is now in the equation. Every single thing I said today is guaranteed certainty. It's been tested, as Jameson said 1,000 times. Literally, I said hundreds of times. He said, sir, actually thousands of times, and won in all of the courts. And we're just going back to that. And the problem is that we had other presidents that weren't into trade. Maybe they weren't business oriented. Maybe they weren't smart. We had some dummies too, you know.
They were paid off to hollow us
We
out.
had some real dummies. So we are going to keep it going just as before, probably more so. But you're no longer going to be asked, every time I got up, you'd ask, well, what happens if you can't charge tariffs? Now we can. And by the way, in their decision, they specifically said, we can do these. We have alternatives, yeah.
David, on the trade deals that were negotiated using AIPA tariffs,
Yeah.
do those stand now, or are they have to be
Well,
redone?
some of them stand. Many of them stand. Some of them won't, and they'll be replaced with the other tariffs.
Mr. President, on the Supreme Court justices who ruled against this the policy, striking it down, are they still invited to your State of the Union
Yeah.
next week? And will you speak with them?
They are invited, barely. Barely. 3 are happily invited. No, they're barely invited. Honestly, I couldn't care less if they come, okay?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. On the trade deal, which is the framework which is to be signed with India sometime soon, will that stand now? And on the decision, nothing changes?
No, nothing changes. They'll be paying tariffs, and we will not be paying tariffs. Our deal with India is they pay tariffs. This is a reversal from what it used to be, as you know. India, and I think Prime Minister Modi is a great gentleman, a great man, actually, but he was much smarter than the people that he was against in terms of the United States. He was ripping us off in India. So we made a deal with India, and it's a fair deal now, and we are not paying tariffs to them, and they are paying tariffs. We did a little flip.
up as of now for this.
Mr. President.
No, the India deal is on here.
Mr. President.
Thank you so much, Mr. President.
All the deals are on it. We're just going to do it a different way.
Mr. President. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I think there's another war that you stopped and you should take the credit, which is in Syria. Secretary Rubio, after his meeting in Munich with the Syrian Foreign Minister and the Kurdish General Muslim Abdi, he said that President Trump was directly involved in efforts to stop the fighting between the Kurds and the Syrians. How will your administration will make sure that this peace is sustained? And do you support the idea
Well, it's a very different topic, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time. But all I can say is that the president of Syria, who I essentially put there, is doing a phenomenal job. He's a rough guy. He's not a choir boy. A choir boy couldn't do it. But Syria is coming together, really coming together well. And thus far, he's been very good to the Kurds. Yeah.
Thank you. Mr. President, what's your message to the Iranian people after 2 rounds of talks with them? Do you have any message to the Iranian people?
The Iranian people in Iran or people here?
People in Iran.
too.
They better negotiate a fair deal. You know, the people of Iran are a lot different than the leaders of Iran. And it's very, very sad situation. But 32,000 people were killed over a relatively short period of time. They were going to hang 800, 2 weeks ago, hang, some by crane. They lift them up with a tall crane, and they play them around the square. They were going to hang 837 people. And I gave them the word, if you hang one person, even one person, that you're going to be hit right then and there. I wasn't waiting 2 weeks and negotiating. And they gave up the hanging. They didn't hang 837. Supposedly, they didn't hang anybody. But no, I feel very badly for the people of Iran. They've lived in hell. Please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You mentioned multiple times foreign influence over the Supreme Court. Do you have evidence of that? And if not, will you investigate that?
You're going to find out.
What alternatives are you going to put into place in your relationship with Europe and also those tariffs that have been called illegal? How they're going to go impact the relationship with Russia, your sanctions?
Well, I want Europe to strengthen up. Europe has gone woke. Europe is not recognizable when you go into so many places. Not all countries. You look at Hungary. You look at Poland, Czech. Slovakia. There are some countries that have gone very much the opposite, some really, and some others. But Europe has to be strong, and they become soft and not recognizable. You go into some of the countries, I don't want to be specific, but I think everyone knows what I'm talking about, and they're not recognizable. They become, the environmentalists have taken over. They've got windmills destroying their fields and their beautiful meadows and their oceans, and they're paying a fortune. Now, Europe has to get smart. Europe's getting killed on two things, energy and immigration. And if they don't solve both of them fast, Europe is not the same place. Yeah, please.
Justices Gorsuch and Barrett, are you surprised in particular by their decision today? And do you regret nominating them?
I don't want to say whether or not I regret. I think their decision was terrible. Yeah. I think it's an embarrassment to their families. You want to know the truth? The two of them. Yeah.
Specifically on that $2,000 tariff check.
Mr. President,
I didn't call you. You didn't call me?
Yeah, Mr. President, to be clear, do you believe at the end of implementing these new tariff tools, the tariff rate and tariffs will ultimately be higher than they currently are?
Potentially higher. How much higher? It depends, whatever we want them to be. But we want them to be fair for other countries. And, you know, we have some countries that have treated us really badly for years, and it's going to be high for them. And we have other countries that have been very good, and it's going to be very reasonable for them. Yeah.
Specifically on the tariffs question, I mean on the $2,000.
I didn't call you.
Mr. President, thank you, Mr. President. Do you have any plans to travel to India for the Quad Summit, and how do you think your relationship with India is right now?
I think my relationship with India is fantastic, and we're doing trade with India. India pulled out of Russia. You know, India was getting its oil from Russia, right? And they pull way back at my request because we want to settle that horrible war where 25,000 people are dying every month. And my relationship with Prime Minister Modi is, I would say, great. I also stopped a war between India, and Pakistan, as you know. There were 10 planes we shot down. That war was going, and probably going nuclear. And just yesterday, the Prime Minister of Pakistan said President Trump saved 35 million lives by getting them to stop. And I did it largely with tariffs. I said, look, you're going to fight, that's fine, but you're not going to do business with the United States, and you're going to pay a 200% tariff, each country. And they called up and they said, we have made peace. Okay? I just want to thank you all. Look, great certainty has been brought back to the economy of the United States, and actually the economy of the world, because we generate so much in the world. We're the biggest in the world, and we're now the strongest by far. We were a country that was dead 1.5 years ago. Now we have the hottest country in the world. We're going to keep it that way. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. Did you say 32,000 were killed in Iran, sir?
Wow. All right. So you say we can't tariff anybody? John Roberts, Amy Coney Barrett, Judge Gorsuch, and the 3 flaming libs. Well, guess what? You're getting tariffed even harder. And we'll see how you like that. You say that the statute that we use doesn't apply. That's all right. We got 5 more of them, and we'll just use those. And so Judge Kavanaugh, man, fleshed out the entire argument for them, gave them a basically roadmap, a treasure map on what to do. They had a meeting this morning. They came back, and now the tariffs will be imposed ahead of schedule and under budget. So big updates there from the president. Of course, you see we changed the chyron on the screen. Trump strikes back. Supreme Court's victory, very, very fleeting. Not going to last long. We are taking a look at the Dow, and the market went up, and it's still kind of staying up. We were wondering if it was going to drop back down, but it looks like New York Stock Exchange. Let me take a look. Yeah, so things are moving around, but the truth is we're going to have tariffs. The president's not giving up on the effort to restore American excellence, stop having our country hollowed out by foreign countries who steal our industry, steal our jobs, and then pump us back full of their cheap Chinese crap. Not happening anymore. The president now out today with the new announcement, tariffs will continue until morale improves. So we're excited for that. Big updates from the president. And my friends, thanks for joining us. We had a Fulton County segment that we were going to do today, but we're going to bump that until tomorrow. Your boys got to start prepping for this evening and figure out what the heck is going on exactly. And so we'll pause here after we hear from you. It's been a beautiful day. We got the Supreme Court with the big decision, and of course, very fleeting. And so you could even argue that it's been overruled. All right, fine. You say we can't use the IEEPA? No problem at all. We'll just use all of our other power. So very good development. They got that done quickly. The Supreme Court was, satisfied for about 20 minutes. And now it's reversed. All right, so let's hear from you and let's see what you say about all of this and more. As a reminder, we're coming back this evening. So we're going to have a big, long stream tonight with our friends at Empower Oversight. We're talking about a new Hunter Biden documentary. It's called Shielded by Power, and it's about the cover-up of the Hunter Biden scam, how they tried to steal 2020 or cover it up in order to steal 2020. We're going to have some great guests. My understanding is we've got Miranda Devine, John Solomon, maybe some others who are awesome people, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll be doing that all night tonight. We'll be live here, 6 Arizona time. I think that's 8 Eastern time, and that's 5 p.m. California time, which is where this is all being situated. And so it's going to be a great stream. But now, my friends, let's hear from you. Let's see what you say about all of this and more. We had a couple of comments came in earlier. And of course, Kat, we all just get along. Thank you so much for that. Looking forward to tonight's show. We already got it scheduled, so let me drop the link in the chat if you want to go and just mark that one down. New documentary announcement is coming tonight, and it's Shielded by Power. All right, let me grab this link, and then you can come and join us. Get the shareable link. Boom. Let's open this up on YouTube so I can show you what it looks like. And here it is. So this is the announcement. Let's see who's on. Yeah, look at all these amazing people who are coming in tonight. So this should be happening tonight Shielded by Power documentary announcement. We're going to play the trailer. Look at your boy right there. They made me look all good on a thumbnail. John Paul Mac Isaac, the laptop guy. Devin Archer, the business partner of Hunter Biden. Joseph Ziegler and Gary Shapley. Those were the two IRS whistleblowers. We got John Solomon supposedly coming by. Miranda Devine. And then there's your boy down there who's going to be trying to MC the whole thing. So we'll see how we do. But come join us and we'll be in the chat. Of course, we'll be hearing from you. If you have anything, any questions for them, that would be very helpful so that I can use those. It's 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, and I think it's going to be going for quite a long time. It's brought to us by Empower Oversight, the IRS whistleblowers law firm, and Fruition Productions. They've got a producer and all sorts of stuff who's going to, keep me on track. So it's going to be great. Come join us tonight. We'll be back, but your boy's got to get prepped up and review and, decide what is going on. But it's going to be amazing. So that is this evening. So we will not have a regular show at the regular time, but come back a few hours later than the regular time, and we'll have a great stream. And let me drop that link in the chat in case you do want to join. Wherever the chat is with my 5,000 tabs that are open right now. All right. So yeah, it should be good. It should be fun. It should be fun. No fee. It's all free. It's all free. In order to watch the documentary, you might have to, well, they'll tell us about what's going on with the documentary. But that's the link. Let me pin that in case you want to come and join us tonight. It should be fun. All right, so that's over there. Let me drop this over here. And over for our Rumble friends. What's going on? We'll also connect it on Rumble. I don't think it's live on Rumble yet. I got to connect our platforms to the main feed, and it'll be fun. All right, so my friends, thanks for joining us, and thanks for subscribing. Thanks for being here. Tomorrow, Membos, we'll get into the Fulton County update, so we'll bump that tomorrow morning for our Saturday stream because we weren't expecting the president to come out lickety-split and overrule the Supreme Court. John Roberts is like, Sorry, John. Try again. Mr. Don, what's up? Yeah, there goes the SCOTUS in DJT's pocket. And man, Trump came out pretty hard against the Supreme Court. He's going to get criticized for that. A lot of the lefty, how dare he castigate the Supreme Court? Okay, cry harder. But Mr. Don, thank you. Yeah, hey, Rubos, good to see you. Hey, we saw someone say that Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, which allows tariffs on national security grounds and has already been used to target steel, aluminum, autos, copper, and lumber. SCOTUS did not rule against Section 232. No. They didn't. And a lot of those are a lot more explicit than the AIPA provisions and the AIPA statutes. So that should be more difficult for them to undo. And Trump will just motor forward with these things. And then we'll see what John Roberts and the rest of the middle libs want to do about that. Yeah, Gauntlet KI. Can your lawyer threaten to unalive you? Wexner's did. I know. Did you guys see that clip? Let me grab that real quick because it was so insane. There's an F-bomb in this clip, so if you've got little ones out there. Yeah, it's crazy. This is like a real clip. Even C-SPAN posted it. Yeah, C-SPAN is even sending this one. And it's insane. This is Wexner, the guy who was just deposed over the Epstein files. C-SPAN says, at the end of this exchange, goes for a couple minutes, Les Wexner's lawyer says to him, I will effing kill you if you answer another question with more than 5 words. Is that a true threat? Can you just, there's statutes on the books for threatening and intimidating, even if it is your lawyer. And here's the whisper right there. Okay, so listen to this. There's an F word in here. C-SPAN, what are you doing? What are you doing to us? This is a live stream. We're live right now.
Or valuables. It is like, how could you have all silverware in your house and I didn't count forks and spoons. And it's like, Jeff said, people could be walking out with forks and spoons. Gee, that's a good idea. We ought to have an inventory. But then there was I hired a lady to be like the house manager who had run the U.S. Embassy in Rome. And she said, yeah, I know how to do this. And I said, well, why don't we keep inventories of stuff. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I could do that." So she did that as kind of a puny example, but I wouldn't have had the idea. But then all the things were inventoried. That wasn't work for me or Jeffrey. It was just regularly done. Answer the question. Okay.
Yeah, threatening an elderly man like that, even if he is a pervert, as alleged Les Wexner. Insane, man. That's pretty insane. So feels to me like it's more like a handler. I don't think that he's going to claim to be a victim and then say that his lawyer should be prosecuted for threatening and intimidating, but completely unethical. I'm not sure a bar would like that very much. Might be passed off as jokey or something, but it's insane. That's what's going on. So don't you say another effing word or I'll effing kill you. Okay. That's the type of people we're dealing with. Past my prime. What's up? Good to see you. Thanks for being a membo, joining up as a supporter. We'll see you tomorrow on the members only stream in the morning. J-Mac, what's up? Rob, off topic a little. What happened with the auto pen? Is it officially void? And if, well, Trump said it was. I mean, I don't think he said it in an official executive order. I think he just posted about it online. Like he posted it on Truth, like everything is officially void. Why is Jackson still on SCOTUS? Likewise, the judges installed. Nobody's taken any action on it. So Trump just kind of declared it. Trump, if he were to say, like let's say he issues an executive order that undoes that appointment. Like what if Trump comes out and says, by executive order, I'm now appointing somebody to Ketanji's position. I find her invalid. I'm now going to appoint somebody in her position. He hasn't done anything like that. So his Truth Social post, I think, doesn't carry enough action that would be challenged or that could deliver a result. It was just kind of like a post. And there's been really, no other action on something like that. And if Trump decided that, then he would get sued and then we'd have to litigate over the validity of the auto pen, which maybe we should, to be honest with you. And in fact, yes, we absolutely should, because Joe Biden was an invalid and there were other people signing for him. But in terms of, stuff that you can latch onto, we just haven't seen any concrete action. And so you would need something more than just a Truth Social post. And I think that's all it was. It was just basically a Truth Social post. But if he came out with an executive order that said Ketanji is invalidly appointed and I am appointing somebody else and I'm now asking the Senate and submitting a name for a nominee over to the Senate, then you start to have something to latch onto in terms of litigation that you could flesh out in court. But it's a great question. And based on this ruling, wait for it, the not a biologist may have been invalidly appointed. And that's fine. She can go and celebrate on Broadway and go to the Grammys for all we care. Thank you for that, J-Mac. Thank you for the nice dono. Good morning to you. Happy Friday. Lori Anderson, what's up? Man, Lori, thank you for becoming a membo. We'll see you tomorrow on the members only morning stream. We'll talk about Fulton and other things. Jennifer Whittington. Jennifer, you too. Welcome. Thank you both for signing up and supporting us. And I think one of you has been around for a while. So Jennifer Whittington, thank you for that. Renee, how many Supreme Court justices will show up to the State of the Union? Yeah, that's a good question, especially after today. Like, I don't know if Amy, Roberts, I've listened to Roberts do interviews about this, and he has a reverence for it. He has a reverence for the State of the Union. And he thinks that, I've heard him say that he doesn't think he should go because they get lectured, like Obama scolded them when they were sitting there in front of them and they can't say anything about it. But Roberts still goes, and we'll see. Let's say over under. I say four show up. Gorsuch, maybe Amy Bales, Roberts. It's a good question. I don't know. We'll see. Good to see you, Renee. We'll see. Coming soon. That's on Tuesday. Shiloh, this decision is the equivalent of saying a court can impose the death penalty for a crime, but not prison time. Yeah, you can literally cut off trade with the entire country, but you can't impose a tariff. Trump said, well, guess we'll just use the other provisions. Thank you, Judge Kavanaugh. We appreciate the insight. That math ain't mathin'. We're cooked. We were until Kavanaugh came out and gave us a nice little roadmap and treasure map for more tariffs. And now Trump wasted not a minute, man. As soon as they got out there, as soon as they could get out, they got out. Hey, Rick, Shiloh, what's up? We got some other membos coming in. Shiloh 420 here. Yeah, okay. Shiloh, 420, what's up? 10 membos coming in. We got Aha, Forgotten American. What's up? Fett, Karen Simmons is here. We've got Dario Bird. What's up? Savage Randy. What's up, Savage Randy? Bar Heel, Preston Gundatech. We got Keith Jones and Emmanuel Mendoza all joining up. Man, good to see you guys. We'll see you tomorrow on the members-only morning stream on Saturday. Can't believe it's Saturday already. That's amazing. NTX Nancy, 9 months as a member. Happy new baby to us, NTX Nancy. Thanks for being here full term. Thank you for explaining the Supreme Court ruling. I'm relieved. Hugs. Hugs for everybody. Get in here. Get in here. Nice. Tish Q. What's up, Tish Q? Good to see you, man. Thank you, Tish Q, for joining up. We have great members-only streams on Saturdays, and we normally do members-only streams in the morning as well, but today we have a little bit of a change of schedule. Mama, mom. What? Hi, runs out the room. Interactions with mom. You cannot be pro-globalist while perpetrating pro-America and pro-Constitution. Stop something the globalist on your knees and stand for America. Yeah, and it's bizarre. Like John Roberts says, Obama can come and mandate you buy a product. That's a tax. Tax is the power to destroy, but it's okay. To mandate that you buy a product in America. You are now ordered to go buy a product or else you get penalized. Versus the president engaging in foreign affairs where he has much more whole jurisdiction, who's now trying to restore America ultimately. And that's a tax that's too harmful. And it's a major question. And so now you can't impose that from Roberts. Now he'll say that domestically, the American Congress passed Obamacare, just barely, through reconciliation, I think, if you remember. And that was, basically affirming the Congress. But I would make the same argument. Congress affirmed the AIPA, delegated that to the president, but that's now a major question for you that's too broad and too big. All right, so thank you, Interactions with Mom, for the very, very colorful comment. We appreciate that. Thanks for being here. Tish Koo, man, thank you for getting this out so fast. Thank you, Tish Koo. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, it was a big one today. We weren't sure what SCOTUS was going to drop. Part of us we said yesterday, part of us was thinking that they would not drop the tariff today because the State of the Union is going to come up, and obviously things just got a lot more contentious. Like Trump is kind of accusing them without any evidence of being bought and paid for by foreign interests, and that's a pretty big accusation. Jerome, what's up, Jerome? Man, shout out with the dumbbell in the house. We appreciate you sending that one in. Got to lift those weights, baby. We have to outlift the left in more ways than one. Tish Koo, any tariff refunds should have been paid to the people. The business have already passed them on to the consumers per the Democrats. Yeah, in other words, like, why should they get a windfall? So we pay the tariffs, they pass the cost to us, and then they just get an extra like couple $1 billion in profits. If you like say take the $150 billion and send that out to all the different companies. We'll see. I mean, I guess we're going to litigate those refunds. Those refunds may be tied up in court for another couple of years since SCOTUS didn't do anything to confirm what should happen with that. Chris Creative. What's up, Chris? Okay, so Roberts can help Obamacare pass, saying it's unconstitutional but can pass as a tax. But Trump using 2 federal statutes for tariffs is bad. Yeah. Yeah, it's coming to a conclusion that you want. If you remember back during the Obamacare saga, Obama was like brand new and he had a lot of political clout behind him because America was like, help and change. Yeah. And they brought him in, and Roberts didn't want to, basically undermine like a newly elected president and probably was afraid of being called racist or something. But Chris Creative, that's right. Now, when it's a global interest and not America's interest, and it's Trump and not Obama, then all of a sudden Trump needs to get overruled. Chubby, so basically SCOTUS just ruled that judicial precedent is a made-up construct and holds no real judicial relevance, right? Yeah, according to Kavanaugh, that's exactly right. All that, and Clarence Thomas, all that history is for naught. Because it's a major question. Rather than defaulting and deferring to the president and giving the president a presumption of the power that Congress delegated, now it's just too much. Obamacare is not too much. Even though it's mandating you buy something in America, it's insane. But this is just a little bit too much for them. That's what I heard from SCOTUS and the tariff precedent ignoring the rulings. Good to see you, Chubby. Thanks for being over on Locals. Voice of the people. Only good thing from Biden was chips and the Science Act. Coincidentally, that's why Pelosi bought stock in Nvidia before going to Taiwan. By the end of 2027, our government will not be dependent on Taiwan for chips. Yeah, 2027 I think is a little early, but eventually, yeah, they're building that in Arizona. I've followed that a bit. You know, there's all these fab sites that they're building up in not far from me, actually, probably 60 minutes or so from us, in northern Phoenix, up near Anthem. Huge fab plants going on, and I've been watching them being built over the years, and they're just unleashing them. I think 2020, it's the real sensitive ones, like the 3 nanometer ones. My understanding right now is that like what we're shipping out of here, a portion of it is still going back to Taiwan for finishing. So there's still a little bit of a supply chain problem, but we're working on it. Hopefully 2027 is the date, but yeah, it's very interesting, and it's a big problem if we don't have chips. Thank you for that. Dutchie's mom. Hey, a Georgia driver's license states limited term if issued to a non-citizen. They need their certification of naturalization to vote. This information isn't given to poll workers during training. Man, that's such a good comment. Dutchie's mom. Yeah, and that's why we screech and shout over the rules. Like, the law says one thing, but then the secretaries change by substance the actual laws by creating rules, right? So the statutes are like mandating something, but then you have to train the poll worker. And there's all these other contingents. Well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if this happens? And how should I do this? What should I do first? What's the process? And in the drafting of the manuals, they then pervert the statutes and come to the outcome that they want. The biggest example of this was Jocelyn Benson in Michigan, who said that the law, in her rules, she said that checking signatures was allowed, but she wanted a presumption of validity, right? So that you're checking it, but it's presumed to be valid, and you can only invalidate it if it's very, very aberrational. But that's not the law. The law is you check the signatures. You do not presume that they are valid. Hey, Miss Kayla. What's up, Miss Kayla? Thanks for being a member, number 1. Number 2, thank you for bringing in 5 more. Florida boy, Emilio Cruz. What's up, Victor Marcano? Henry's here. My AZ family. What's up? Shout out to our Arizona friends. And Mick Caffey in the house. All gifted members, courtesy of Kayla. Miss Kayla, to be more specific. Thank you for that. Tiff Ann, what's up? 4 months as a member. Thank you, Tiff Ann. Very glad to have you here for 4 months. We got 5 more to go. Full term for a baby here. Jim Burns. Actually, the only way you can be truly globalist or nationalist is to be both globalist and nationalist. This is one of the biggest topics a human may think about. Because they're kind of like opposites, right? Almost. If you're going to be like a good person, there has to be evil out in the world. Am I thinking about that right? It's a spectrum. So you need to have, on one end of the spectrum, you need to have a counterbalance, kind of like yin and yang. One of the biggest topics a human may think about. Yeah, and if you're in order to be a nationalist, you have to oppose another system, which would be the globalists. In order to be a globalist, there has to be some other alternative that you're against, which in this case is nationalism. Jim Burns, man, that's some philosophical thinking right there. Thank you, Jim. We appreciate that. And thanks for being a membo. Connie, what's up? Great to have you, Connie. Thank you for being a membo. Welcome aboard, our newest supporter in the house. And Past My Prime, 6330. Good to see you, Past My Prime. Thank you for the dono. No comment on that, but thank you for supporting our work this morning. And we're going to check locals, and then we're going to pause for the afternoon, but we're coming back this evening. We're going to get into it again, and it's going to be a doozy of a stream. No doubt about it. Let's see what we got. Just another Albertan talking here about the Monty Python. What is this? Cleese responded by saying, "I'm clearly a terrorist, so I'm afraid they're going to have to arrest me." The tragedy is that is no wicked Monty Python joke. Cleese has every reason to be concerned. Man, I don't even know what that's going on about. No joking matter. John Cleese declares, "I'm afraid they're going to have to arrest me." John Cleese, is he an actor? Man, thank you for that. Patriot Alpha, nothing like Roberts and Barrett giving us a black pill to make your weekend. But remember, the ACA is a tax. Yeah. And that's okay because it's forcing you to buy something. But if the president wants to make sure you have a job on national security matters, or that you're not getting murdered by fentanyl being pumped in through Mexico, then that's a little too destructive. And you have to have Congress go in there and act on that. Hey, what's going on? Gary L. I think I figured out the buffering issue here on locals. It seems to be associated with creators like yourself and Viva and Barnes who upload simultaneously to multiple platforms. I experience the same buffering when watching their lives. That's good feedback. I don't experiencing the buffering when watching the replays. Yeah, I think it's a locals problem, Gary. Thank you, first of all, for confirming that you're seeing it on other platforms. And my follow-up would be, what are you using to watch? Is it the iPhone app? Because a lot of the complaints are about the iPhone app, which I apologize for. I'm not the developer. It's locals. I've sent them emails. They just say, what browser are you on? I said, not on a browser. It's working here on our end. So tech support hasn't been that supportive for me. And I'm as frustrated as you. My only other recommendation, I know it may not be in your interest, but would be to join up on YouTube, which apparently is having no problems at all. So I think it's a locals app issue. Hey, Trump honors Rush Limbaugh. Man, we miss Rush. Let's see what this one looked like. Oh yeah, the president released a tribute to Rush. Man, that's really awesome. Shout out. Thank you, Don Fowler, for that. We got this one from the Rubos. Yeah, what do you think of this section of the Fair Trade Act? Well, we think it's good. Yeah, and it sounds like Trump is using it. So the Rubos shared the entire statute, it looks like, allows the president to impose trade restrictions. We're expecting them to get an executive order. It's probably going to drop today. And it's probably going to be around this. Commerce Secretary found national security problems in all 5 investigations. The president has imposed tariff in 4 cases. Members have indicated the president's use of tariff as a tool. Congress may consider this. Yeah, and we'll probably see an order come down today. I mean, they said as soon as possible they'll get it out. So thank you for that, man. The Rubos in the house with the statutes. John Cleese has done Nazi skits with Monty Python. Really? John Cleese. Yeah, I think I know who that guy is. I think he was really good in Dexter. He was in Dexter. He was like a bad guy in Dexter. I don't want to spoil it. Don't want to spoil it, but should be good. Yes, so tonight, my friend, so we're going to pause here for the morning. Thank you so much for sending these donos in and all the things. Your boy is going to go get prepped up, see if we've got any final updates. We've got a whole lineup that is assembled for this evening. And so we're going to talk about Hunter Biden. We're going to hear hopefully from John Solomon, Miranda Devine, John Paul Mac Isaac, the guy who was at the laptop store who got the laptop dropped off there from Crackhead Hunter. Devin Archer and the IRS whistleblowers. I think we'll also hear from some of the Empower Oversight guys. And it is going to be a great stream. But we'll pause here for the afternoon. Thanks once again for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for checking out the show tonight. And until we're back here, my friends, I hope your Friday is just amazing. We'll also want to shout out our mods and meme smiths. Interactions with Mom dropped this one. Colorful, yes. Just an old military guy watching the corruption and lack of principles from family court all the way to SCOTUS. Man, shout out to our military men and women out there. Thank you for serving us and our country, sir. We appreciate that. Yeah, and it is, unbecoming to acquiesce to the globalists. We are America. We are a nation for Americans. We don't need to serve all of the interests of the rest of the planet. They can deal with themselves. And we're glad to have you here, Interactions with Mom. Thanks for being here and standing for values that are in alignment. We appreciate you. But my friends, okay, so let's wrap here. We're coming back in a few short hours, probably 6 o'clock or so. We'll be back my time, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. California. We're going to have a burner stream. I think it's supposed to go for like hours. We'll play the trailer. We'll have some great interviews, get some good updates from the people who kept the pressure on this story for a long time, and it should be fun. Good, fun way to close out the week. But until we're back, my friends, I hope your Friday is absolutely amazing. Want to thank our awesome mods and meme smiths. Thank you guys for adjusting to the schedule and clipping for us. Muffin Rando in the house. You're amazing. We got K Bean, Carrie B. Good to see you. Thank you for clipping for us this morning, Carrie B, Muffin Rando. We got John Donut Mind Me K-Bean, Neuro D, Janik, Dog Digger over on the Rumbles. We got Geegum, Elliot, and just Rhonda modding the fort down for us, keeping things nice and orderly. And thank you, my friends. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for subscribing to our channel. Hopefully we see you tonight. Thanks for liking the video on the way out. And it's Friday, so hopefully you're doing something fun, closing out the week strong, and we hope to see you back here tonight. But until we do, I hope that you're out there getting after it, making it a great and beautiful day, coming back this evening to join us again, because there, together with your help, we will shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency once again to close out the day. We'll be back in a few short hours to get into it again. Until then, my friends, be well and bye-bye.
Thanks for watching, my beautiful friends. Now it's that time where the stream must end. You brought the heat with every chat and line. Together we exposed corruption. One more time we dove in the truth where the media hides. Lit up the lies with receipts on all sides. The fight isn't over, but we made them sweat. We ain't done yet, no, not just yet. Because together we are watching the watchers. Truth on our side. Watching the watchers. We won't be denied. Watching the watchers. Eyes open wide. Fighting for freedom with nothing to hide. Drop a like and don't forget to share. And bring a friend who's ready to care. Tomorrow's lies are just today's news, but here we see through the scripted ruse. Together we are watching the watchers shine in the light. Watching the watchers defending what's right. Watching the watchers each night, together and living.